Chapter 131. At dawn, Roland was pulled out of bed by Nightingale. He remembered that the last time something like this had happened was when Nana's identity as a witch had been discovered by Sir Pine. "What's going on? Has a new witch been discovered in the town?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "No, Your Highness." Nightingale shouted with an excited face, "Anna. Anna's ability has changed again." Again? Roland had not completely woken up from his drowsiness. "Isn't she already an adult?" "It's another change after becoming an adult. I have never seen such an amazing form of magic. It's almost like an entity." Nightingale brought a washbasin. "Scroll and Vendi have also never heard of such a thing. You quickly go and have a look. Everyone is waiting for you in the office." Roland casually washed his face, put on his clothes, and followed Nightingale to the second floor. When he entered the office, the 11 witches immediately focused their eyes on him. Among them, Anna's eyes were a little swollen, as if she had not slept all night. "Who can tell me what happened?" The first to speak was Nightingale. "This morning when I walked through Anna's room, I saw her sleeping in front of the table. There was a pile of iron lumps on the table. I was going to wake her up, but when I got closer, I found that the magic in her body had become..." She paused for a moment, as if she was thinking of how to describe it. "It had become a fixed shape, like a constantly rotating square." "A square?" Roland walked in front of Anna and carefully looked at her. Apart from her slightly tired spirit, he could not see any other differences. Then he noticed a cylinder on the table. It seemed to be made of pig iron, with a gray smooth surface and a neat cut at the top, making him think that he was seeing things. "This is... Anna did it," Nightingale said. "With her new ability. After a witch awakens, her body will gather magic power. At first, it will be as thin as mist, but after a few years, it will slowly turn into a group of different colors. For example, Vendi's magic power is white, Leaf's is green. Anna's magic power used to be very large, but after she became an adult, her magic power condensed a lot, turning it dark green. But now, the magic power in her body is only the size of a fist, like a solid, completely opaque." She picked up the quill on the desk and sketched. "That's about it." Although Nightingale's drawing skills were terrible, Roland could still tell that it was a cube. He looked at Anna. "What happened last night?" Anna recounted her experience. When she finished speaking, the other witches still had a blank look on their faces. They didn't understand what the small round ball, vibration, connection, and ability change had to do with it. Only Roland's heart was slightly moved. In his mind, magic power was a kind of energy, and the witches were the terminals that released it. The effects of magic power were endless, but the final result depended on the witch who controlled it, or further, it depended on the witch's thoughts. If his guess was correct, thoughts could have a profound impact on a witch's ability. To put it simply, a person who had never seen an airplane would have a hard time imagining that a huge iron bird could fly in the sky. A person who had never seen the universe would naturally not know how vast the world was. The height of thought and the breadth of knowledge would limit the use of magic power. Every further understanding of the nature of the world would bring great progress in science and technology. So, would the witch's ability be the same? With a deeper understanding of the world, the effect of magic power would also be closer to the origin? "Let me see your new ability," Roland asked curiously. Anna stretched out her finger, and a black flame appeared out of thin air at her fingertips. It looked no different from an ordinary flame, except that it didn't emit light. "Can your black flame change its shape at will?" Anna nodded and controlled it to float on the table. Soon, the black flame that was in the shape of a natural flame suddenly turned into a cube. Before anyone could react, the cube spread out into a black cloth, almost covering the entire table. Then it gathered towards the center, gradually turning into a straight line. Roland couldn't help but reach out and touch it. He found that this hair-thin black line didn't move at all. This was simply incredible. Even if it was as hard as steel, after stretching it into a thin wire, it could still be easily bent by fingers. This was determined by the flexibility of the object, and an absolutely rigid body didn't exist. "Can it be a little thinner?" "Yes, but then you can't touch it anymore," Anna said, Otherwise it will cut you. What about the temperature? Can you also control it at will? Yes, and compared to the green flame, I can make it produce different temperatures in different parts. Roland somewhat understood what Nightingale meant when she said it was as if it was real. Compared to the green flame that was as warm as water, her current ability had condensed and taken shape, and it wasn't appropriate to describe it as a flame. When Anna accepted the view that everything in the world was made up of microscopic particles, her understanding of the temperature produced by flames also broke through to a new stage of particle motion producing temperature. What was certain was that she wasn't controlling particles, just like how she didn't control flames before. Whether it was the ordinary flame at first, or the green flame and black flame after adulthood, they were all manifestations of magic power. Although both of them converted magic power into heat, the effect was completely different. A real genius, Roland couldn't help but sigh. He couldn't think of a more suitable adjective other than genius. After learning new knowledge that night, she could immediately understand and apply it to her ability. This kind of thinking and absorption ability could only be possessed by extremely talented people. Anna's change also made him more interested in exploring the true meaning of this world. It's a pity that I can't have magic power, Roland thought. This may be the biggest regret after crossing over. After all, most people have a superhero dream in their hearts, accidentally obtaining incredible power, and from then on embarking on a different path. What a carefree thing. I probably know the reason for the change in Anna's ability. He put away the regret in his heart and said to the witches. What is it? Everyone asked one after another. Learning. Learning? Scroll murmured, do you mean yesterday's teaching? Exactly, Roland stated his conjecture succinctly. Knowledge will help you improve your abilities, and even bring about leaps and bounds in your abilities. Can I also? Mystery Moon asked timidly. Of course, Roland patted her on the shoulder. If it weren't for the limited number of steam engines and the lack of rubber to make wires, the strong magnets she enchanted would have come in handy. Originally, the purpose of Roland's class was to pass on the knowledge he had learned to scroll, to prevent himself from forgetting more and more. Now that he accidentally discovered that learning knowledge could also have the effect of increasing their ability, it became a very necessary thing to give all witches a class together. Of course, he also understood that not everyone had an outstanding talent like Anna. Like Nightingale, who could fall asleep while listening to the class, he didn't have any hope for her. From remembering to understanding, and from understanding to using, there were many gaps between them. In the end, how many people would be able to use the knowledge they had learned to their ability, he didn't know. You didn't sleep well last night, Roland said to Anna, go and catch up on your sleep. I'll test your new ability in 2 days. Okay, Anna nodded seriously. Chapter 132. It had already been 5 days since Prius was locked up here. Although it wasn't a prison cell, the renovated residence was almost the same as a prison cell. The original wooden door had been replaced with wooden railings, all the furniture in the house had been removed, leaving only a few blankets. The only good thing about it was that the room could be considered clean, with neither wind nor rain leaking in. In addition to him, there were 4 other people in the prison. 3 of them were from the Ryan family, 1 was from the Wolf family, and he himself was a knight of the Earl of Elk family. Damn it, how long does he want to keep us here? The oldest knight of the Ryan family shouted, the wheat fields in the territory haven't been sown yet. My wife doesn't know how to do these things. Your territory. The young knight of the Wolf family sneered, do you think His Royal Highness will still keep the knight territory, let you go back to collect horses, weapons, and armor, and then wait for an opportunity to take revenge? To be honest, he hasn't sent all of you to the gallows, it's already merciful. What did you say? The old knight stared at him. I'm just telling the truth, the young knight said indifferently, the Duke is the #1 criminal who planned and carried out the rebellion. If he didn't clean up his elite knight regiment, would he leave them to his son? As for us, we were naturally forced to go to the battlefield by the Duke's threat. I think you're bringing about your own destruction. He walked over and picked up the young man, his right hand clenched into a fist, and when he was about to hit him, a hand stretched out from behind and firmly grabbed him. Stop, Harlan. Do you want to attract the guards? A handsome knight pressed his fist down. He's right, we are knight under the Duke's command. When convicted, we will inevitably receive a heavy sentence. Since we've reached this step, we just need to wait for the result. Look at the people of the Elk family, and then look at you now. Where's your noble demeanor? He was the Star Knight of Longsong's stronghold, Philin Schilt, nicknamed the Light of Dawn, who had charmed many noble young ladies. In the end, he actually married a commoner woman as his wife. This matter could be considered to have caused quite a stir at that time. Seeing that he was mentioned, Prius could no longer remain silent and said to the three who were arguing, I don't know if we can keep the territory, but at least His Royal Highness won't take your lives. Oh. Why? Killing you in the stronghold would at least serve as a deterrent. Who are we going to kill you for after spending so much effort to bring you here? His subjects? Prius shook his head. The Knight Regiment hasn't even taken a single step into Border Town. The townsfolk naturally wouldn't hate them if they didn't rush in to burn, kill, and loot. Therefore, to the prince, it was better to kill the nobles in the stronghold than to let the townsfolk see. If they didn't kill in the stronghold, their lives would be saved. Philin thought about it and nodded. That makes sense. May I ask your name is? Prius Dessau. Thank you for your comfort, Sir Dessau. Philin gave him a grateful look and pulled Halon back to sit in the corner. The young man also sat down, leaning against the wall and humming a song. He really isn't afraid, Prius thought, and his own calm is just a facade. Prius knew that he really wasn't cut out to be a knight. He didn't inherit his father's bravery, nor did he inherit his mother's wisdom. Compared to wielding a sword, he preferred to take care of his own small territory. Raising chickens and ducks, fishing by the pond and so on. He had no choice but to fight for the Earl of Elk family, let alone kill people. He didn't even like to participate in hunting. So when they charged, Prius tried to rush to the back, but he didn't expect to survive. Wait. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt a little strange. As the Duke's Star Knight, why did Philin Schilt also survive? Shouldn't he be the first to rush? His Royal Highness wants to see you, the guards suddenly shouted from the door. Sirius Daly, you come out first. The young knight jumped up, waved to the crowd, and walked out of the cell. Hey, what about us? Halon chased to the door, but was forced back by the guard's short stick. After locking the cell door, the guard said in a cold voice, Don't worry, it will be your turn. Knowing that the trial was coming, Prius became more and more nervous. Damn it, when there was no result, I always looked forward to this day, but now that the result is coming, I'm afraid. He thought angrily. But his body still couldn't help but tremble. Every few breaths he wanted to look up at the door, just like when a child was about to be born for the first time. The feelings of hope and panic coexisted. Fortunately, the waiting time was not long. About half an hour later, the guard in charge of the escort came again. Prius Dessau, it's your turn. He stood up in a panic, but his feet accidentally tripped on the rolled-up blanket on the ground. Fortunately, Philin's eyes and hands were quick. He stepped forward and supported him. Thank you. He felt his throat was dry. It's nothing. The guard's voice was gentle and powerful, making Prius's nervous mood ease a lot. He nodded to Philin, and followed the guard out of the cell. The one leading the way was a young man, about 17 years old, wearing dark brown leather armor and boots, holding a short stick in his hands. Don't you need to tie my hands? Prius asked. You've been searched before you were locked up, without a weapon, what can you do? Where are you taking me? His Royal Highness Castle. What about the man before? The knight called Sirius, what happened to him? The other side shrugged, not answering. Well, maybe he doesn't know, maybe he doesn't want to tell me. Prius closed his mouth. This escort gave him a very strange feeling. He dressed and looked like an ordinary civilian, but when he spoke to the knight, he didn't show the slightest fear. He didn't even use the most basic honorifics. He didn't seem to know that, in normal times, these people could easily decide his life or death. Prius had seen a lot of commoners who had to struggle for survival. They were dull and indifferent, just like a soulless walking corpse. But in the eyes of this little man, he saw pride and pride. He was obviously a commoner, but he had the same demeanor as a knight who was full of honor. This extreme sense of incongruity made Prius very confused. In the end, what kind of environment can create such a person? He looked around. Although he had never been to Border Town before, he had heard about this barren and desolate place. But now the town was full of vitality. It was very different from the border outpost he had imagined. The streets were full of people, their pace was fast, it seemed that they had endless things to do. From time to time, someone would greet the little man who was escorting him. Everyone's face was ruddy, full of energy. It didn't look like they had just experienced the hardships of the months of the demons. As he approached the castle area, he saw an open space where more than 100 people gathered. This group seemed to be building a house, and according to the scale, there was more than one house. The materials for the house were piled up on the side, they were all fired bricks. Generally speaking, only nobles would choose such expensive materials, but if it was built for nobles, the area of the house was too small. The houses that had been built in front of the open space were almost a little bigger than his own living room. In addition, the houses were too similar, almost like they were printed from the same mold. Which nobleman would like such a house? Chapter 133. Before entering the living room, Prius was searched again. This time, the search was much more detailed. From top to bottom, every place where a knife or dagger could be hidden was searched, even the soles of his shoes were not spared. Then he saw the people who defeated the Duke's coalition in the hall, the fourth prince of Greycastle, the lord of Border Town, and the new ruler of the western region, Roland Wimbledon. The prince had long grey hair, a symbol of the royal bloodline, and his face looked very young, at most 20 years old. He did not tie his hair, nor did he wear any crown. The fingers holding the quill were slender, and there was no jewelry or ring on his hand, not even a bracelet. This was very rare among the nobles. Prius Dessau, the knight of the Earl of Elk? Roland leaned back in his chair, looking at the list in his hand. Yes, your highness. Prius knelt down on one knee. He still found it hard to believe that such a person, who did not even have a beard on his face, could lead a group of miners and hunters to defeat the Duke of Ryan, who had been entrenched in the western region for a long time. Can you read? How about reading and writing? Stand up and answer. I can, your highness. This is the most basic requirement for a knight. Prius stood up unsteadily, suddenly remembering that some old knight had not yet been popular in Greycastle when they were knighted, so he added, I mean, the new batch of knight. In the past 30 years, fewer and fewer knight had been knighted because of their strength and military exploits, and the number of other considerations had increased. If one did not know how to write and read official documents, it was difficult to be chosen by the Lord. And the rise of outstanding young people like King City's Cold Wind Knight, and the light of dawn of the western region had raised the requirements for a knight to a new height. So now that he had become a trainee knight, the first thing he had to learn was to read and write, and to a higher level, he also needed to be proficient in all kinds of etiquette. But Prius did not understand why His Highness asked him this question. Very well, the prince nodded, then I will now make a judgment. This sentence instantly made him hold his breath. You have two choices. The first is to work in the North Slope mine for 20 years to atone for your sins. The second is to become a teacher and teach my people how to read and write. Miners were not slaves. They were also paid and could rest for 3 days every month. Not only were the teachers paid, but they also had free housing and 2 days off per week. However, if you chose the latter option, you would have to work until you were 50 before you could quit your job. Don't worry, even if you quit at that time, your salary will still be paid as usual. Prius breathed a sigh of relief after hearing this. Sure enough, as he had expected, there was no execution or exile. But these two options made him feel puzzled. Miners sounded like coolies, but His Royal Highness said that there was a salary and holidays. Shouldn't a teacher only be someone with profound knowledge be able to take up the position? He only knew how to read and write. Moreover, What did he mean by teaching the people? Could it be that His Royal Highness wanted to train these commoners as nobles? Most importantly, neither of them mentioned how to deal with their territories. Prius looked up at the prince and cautiously asked, "Your Royal Highness, I don't know if I choose one of the two options. My territory will. From the moment you raised your sword against me, your territory no longer belongs to you," Roland said bluntly. "On this point, I have reached an agreement with the heir of the Elk family. He will convert the property in your territory into golden dragon as compensation, and after you make your choice, the new count will send the compensation along with your family to Border Town, so that he can vacate a new place to recruit a knight." Prius' heart sank. His territory was nothing more than a house, a flock of chickens and ducks, and the fish in the pond. How much could these things be worth as compensation? The new count would certainly cut it again. At that time, it would be hard to say whether or not he would have 30 golden dragons. The count had just died, and his heir had abandoned him. This heartlessness made Prius disappointed. As an accomplice of a rebel, this is already a very light sentence. Roland paused for a moment and said, "Besides, what's there to regret about a barren land? Whether you choose to work in the mines or become a teacher, you will be able to save enough money to buy land in Border Town." Hearing this sentence, Prius regained some of his spirit. He would certainly not consider working in the mines. As for the other option, "Your Royal Highness, I don't know how much a teacher's salary is. For a junior teacher, 20 silver royals a month, and 5 more every year until the age of 50. After the age of 50, the salary will be calculated according to the maximum value. By the way, this right cannot be inherited, nor can it be transferred." Prius calculated a little in his mind and found that he would have an income of nearly 3 golden dragons a year. Moreover, it would increase year by year. As long as 4 or 5 years passed, it would almost catch up with the income of his territory. "Your Royal Highness, what does a junior teacher mean? Are there other types of teachers?" "Of course there are. Junior teachers only teach reading and writing. Intermediate and senior teachers teach all kinds of subject knowledge. As long as you have a unique skill that is beneficial to the development of Border Town, you can serve as a teacher." Roland sat up straight. "What, do you have any skills that you are good at?" "I don't need riding or swordsmanship. However, I am not good at these things," Prius thought. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Your Royal Highness, do raising chickens and ducks count? I am also very good at fishing." As soon as he said it, he regretted it. How could this be considered a skill? They could live by themselves if they were left in the wild. There were many nobles who raised cats and birds, but no one had ever raised these things. As for fishing, it was the same as hunting, it could only be regarded as a personal hobby. He didn't expect His Royal Highness to be interested in the first half of his sentence. "Oh. How do you raise them? Tell me." Prius had to bite the bullet and said, "Well, according to my experience of raising them in my territory, compared to letting them go free, they can grow faster if they are fed with some grain every day. If the grain is mixed with some sand, the effect is the same, and we can also save food. It is best to set up a shed in a ventilated place to keep out the sun, rain, and cold. Especially in the hot summer, if there is no shed, the hens are likely to stop laying eggs. In winter, we can put some straw inside to prevent the chickens from freezing to death. In addition, if we feed them some small fish every month, the chickens will rarely get sick. Of course, cleaning up the chicken manure is also very important." At the end of his sentence, he found that His Royal Highness unexpectedly laughed. "Yes, it seems that the nobles of the Western Territory are not useless." "Your Royal Highness." Prius couldn't understand the meaning of the other side's words. Chapter 134. Roland wrote down the method of dealing with Prius on a piece of paper, put down the quill and rubbed his sore neck. Nightingale's voice sounded in his ear, "Your Highness, do you need me to help you relax? There are still more than 30 people to deal with, I'll do it later." Roland smiled and shook his head, picked up the bell on the table and shook it a few times. The sooner he finished these trivial matters, the sooner he could start the work of universal education in Border Town. Moreover, the exploration of Anna's new ability filled him with expectations. A tall knight was brought into the living room by the guards. At first glance, Roland felt that he was extraordinarily handsome, comparable to Carter, who had the face of a Prince Charming. Of course, this kind of handsomeness was a deduction in Roland's eyes. He glanced at the name list, Philin Schilt. Unlike the others, there was a note behind the other's name, which he also read out: Lion Knight Regiment Commander, the Light of Dawn, First Knight of the Western Region. You really have a lot of titles. Yes, Your Highness. Philin knelt down on one knee. I thought people like the commander or the first knight would take the lead on the battlefield. Roland raised his eyebrows. How did you survive? I hid in the back, he said calmly. As long as you control the horse's stride, it looks like you're sprinting with all your strength, but in fact, the horse's speed won't increase much. Such a straightforward answer surprised Roland. He thought that the other would find some excuse to cover up the fact that he was afraid of fighting and ran away. It seemed that this matter wasn't as simple as he thought. Sure enough, Philin quickly continued, on the third morning of your pursuit, which was the day the Duke was defeated, I followed him, looking for an opportunity to kill him. Unfortunately, his personal guards were numerous, and they were very close, so I couldn't find a suitable opportunity to kill him. Fortunately, your troops killed him. Speaking of this, the knight bowed his head deeply. Your Highness, I thank you for this. If you need me, please feel free to assign me. The last sentence could be seen as an oath of allegiance. Roland was stunned for a moment and then said, Stand up first. Tell me, what exactly happened? Yes, he got up and said, My wife, Irene, was originally a civilian woman who worked in the theater of Longsong Stronghold. We met by chance and fell in love with each other. I wanted to marry her, but my father and mother did not support the wedding, so I had to move out of the estate and rent a room on a farm near the fortress, where the wedding was to take place. Not long after her marriage, Irene finally got the opportunity to perform for the first time. The knight's voice was a little low. Unexpectedly, the Duke watched the play and took a fancy to her. After a long time, I learned about this matter from her mouth. I wanted to ask the Duke, but Irene knelt down and begged me not to be reckless. I also knew that if I did it in person, not to mention the possibility of success, even if I killed him, I wouldn't be able to escape from the hands of his personal guards, and Irene was likely to be the target of revenge by the heir of the Duke Ryan. So I endured until he went to Border Town. I also knew that if I did it in person, not to mention the possibility of success, even if I killed him, I wouldn't be able to escape from the hands of his personal guards, and Irene is likely to be the target of revenge by the heir of the Duke Ryan. So I endured until he went to Border Town. Although I couldn't personally take revenge, but Irene can finally sleep in peace, no longer have to worry about someone breaking into her room at night, and I am also free from this heavy burden. So please allow me to thank you again. So that's how it is. Roland knocked on the table with his quill pen. This was the signal that he and Nightingale had agreed in advance. When they needed to check whether the other party was lying, they would knock on the table. Soon he felt Nightingale's fingers pinching his left shoulder blade, which meant that what she said was true, but this pinch was a little forceful, which made Roland grin. Can you read? How about reading and writing? Philin was startled. It seemed that he couldn't keep up with the prince's train of thought. I can. Then I will now make a judgment. Roland repeated the words he had repeated many times. What is your choice? Your Highness, don't you need me to fight for you? Whether it is a duel or a group battle, I will. No, I don't need it, Roland interrupted. There are no nobles in my army, and I won't recruit nobles in the future. They are an army composed entirely of people. And you will never have the opportunity to pick up a weapon again. Is that so? Philin was silent for a long time before he nodded. I understand. In that case, I choose to become a teacher. A wise choice. Teachers can get housing and a very good salary. I will send someone to pick up your wife, so you can live a good life here. Roland made a gesture for the knight to leave. Please wait, Your Highness, forgive me for asking, he hesitated, do you also say the same thing to the other knight? If they can't become a teacher, they have to work in the mines for 20 years. Yes. Your Highness, I have a subordinate named Heiran. He is an experienced old knight, but he is illiterate. Can I use the golden dragon in exchange for him not being sent to the mines? Of course not, Roland said. If money can redeem your crimes, I will let you go in the stronghold. But he is almost 50 years old, that kind of hard work will destroy his body. He doesn't have the physical strength to mine, but he has the strength to attack border town. And my mine is not a black coal mine. Not only do I have a steam engine to help transport the ore and pump water, the employees also have a fixed holiday, okay? Roland picked up the bell, ready to call the next person in. Your Highness. Philin clenched his teeth and knelt down again. I have a treasure map passed down from my family. It has at least 400 years of history. I am willing to use it in exchange for Heiran's freedom. A 400-year-old treasure map. The prince frowned. Are you sure it wasn't drawn by your ancestors with a charcoal pen to make the younger generation happy? No, it's not charcoal or ink marks. He shook his head slightly, as if recalling the drawing. I can't tell what was used to draw it. The lines are very delicate, smooth and soft to the touch, and it has been in the basement for decades, but the graphics and words haven't faded. My father said it was passed down from generation to generation. It describes the location of the treasure. It is in the northwest of the concealing forest, but it is already a barren land. Ordinary people simply can't go there. Roland tapped the table with the quill pen. Nightingale was still pinching the left side. Well, even if what you said is true, this treasure map should also be hidden in the basement of the Schilt family. You have already given up the inheritance of the territory. I'm afraid they won't be happy to see you again. Indeed, Philin nodded, but the contents of the drawing, I have completely memorized it. I can roughly describe the patterns and words on it. Then draw it and let me see. Roland pushed the quill and paper to the table. If it's true, I can make an exception and grant your request. Your Highness is merciful. He went to the table and began to draw the treasure map. In fact, the Light of Dawn Philin Schilt was not only good at fighting, but also talented in painting and calligraphy. Soon, a rough topographical map appeared in front of Roland. The map showed the back of the impassable mountain range. The rolling mountains from small to large occupied the lower right corner of the whole paper. An equilateral triangle was drawn in the middle of the map. 3 acute angles connected 3 positions, one of which fell at the foot of the northern slope mountain, and the other point in the concealing forest, marked with a 6-pointed star, was probably the so-called location of the treasure. Chapter 135. The number of demons is increasing, and we are becoming fewer and fewer. The holy city of Tequila has fallen, and we are fleeing in all directions. Over the mountains, across the rivers, and as far as we can from the gates of hell. But next time, where can we escape to? What do you think? In the office, Roland closed the Book of Illusion and asked Scroll. If that knight didn't remember wrongly, this is an incredible coincidence. Scroll pondered for a moment. The contents of the treasure map match the essays recorded in the ancient books, which can be said to prove that the church once built a city in the depths of the barbarian land to resist the demons. And the location marked on the map may be a defense tower, outpost, warehouse or other facilities they built. You mean, it's not the real treasure map? Of course, the church is not a bandit or pirate. They don't need to hide the treasure, and also leave a map for future generations. Roland nodded. That's right. So, this is actually a map. 9 out of 10. Although I don't know why the church didn't record the history of this period, I think there must be more than one ruin buried in the forest of the eastern region. Scroll analyzed. If the facility marked on the map is just a building on the ground, after hundreds of years, it will be difficult to find anything. But if it is accompanied by a basement or a storage warehouse, it is likely to be another underground ruin. Through it, we may be able to find some clues. What clues? Why does the church want to hide the existence of the demons? Why did they resist the demons, but keep it a secret? She paused, and her voice became a little lower. And, why do they want to hunt witches as demons? Roland didn't know how to comfort her, so he was silent for a moment, then slowly said, "Unfortunately, I don't know whether his drawing is accurate or not. According to him, the original map is so neat that it doesn't look like it was drawn by hand. How about asking Nightingale to go to the knight's house?" "Not very appropriate," Roland rejected. "A family that can pass a treasure map for hundreds of years may have a storage room full of God's stones of retaliation and traps." "We'll talk about it later," he said, pointing out the length of the triangle. "We can't reach it now, anyhow. If the North Slope mountain foot is regarded as a mining area, then the location of the hexagram is at least 50 kilometers away from us, almost the distance between Border Town and Longsong Stronghold. Except for Lightning, who can arrive in one day, the others will have to walk for 2 to 3 days. What if we encounter demons on the way? I don't want anything to happen to you. You can first let Lightning explore this woodland from the air, maybe she will find something," Scroll suggested. "That's a feasible plan." Roland stood up. "When she comes back, I'll tell her. I'm going to the North Slope mine now, so you can prepare the teaching materials for the class. If you need to make more copies, you can ask Soroya. We still have to continue teaching them tonight." Roland combined the education he had received when he was in elementary school with Prince Roland's palace education method, and instilled them into Scroll, including categorized memory, phonetic symbols, reading and writing, and reciting phrases. With these, he believed that Scroll would become a good teacher. "Yes, Your Highness," Scroll saluted. The backyard of the North Slope mine was now more than twice as large as before, and there were still 2 holes in the ground that hadn't been filled, where the embryos of the 12-pound cannon were cast. When Roland arrived at the backyard, Anna was practicing her new ability, and there were 2 steel pipes on the table. He casually picked one up and looked at it. The steel pipe was perfectly round, and its surface was smooth without any air holes. The hole in the middle was the same as the outer wall, and when it was aimed at the sun, he could see a straight line of light. Roland used his fingernail to check the thickness of the wall at both ends, and found that it was basically the same. Roland was amazed. "How did you make this?" "You see," Anna picked up a freshly cut steel rod and placed it flat in her hand. A thin black line was inserted from the end until it completely ran through the rod, and then it rotated around the center, and the hole was finished. Amazing ability, he thought. Using high-temperature magic to cut objects, while at the same time being precise, Anna alone was enough to push the town's industrial products to a new height. He suppressed his excitement and said, "Let's first do some basic tests." The basic tests included the range of the ability, the strength of the ability, and the duration. Nightingale also appeared from the fog. She was responsible for observing the changes in Anna's magic. The results showed that in addition to the strength and duration of the ability being greatly improved, the range of the black flame was still within 5 meters, and it could only be accurately controlled within 3 meters. At the same time, it was still a summoning ability, and the God's Stone of Retaliation could remove the effect of the black flame, or when Anna ordered the black flame to enter the range of the God's Stone of Retaliation, it would suddenly disappear. It seems that unless I evolve to the point where I can directly use magic, I can't get around this obstacle. Roland thought. However, Anna's new ability still had earth-shaking significance. Using the black flame to make industrial machines, and then producing all kinds of machine tools, the level of mechanical processing could be regarded as a shortcut to quickly rise. However, industrial mass production was always not something that could be accomplished by one person. For example, Carr had built a furnace on the side of the North Slope mountain, and one had already been completed. After putting it into use, it was found that the firing of clay bricks was okay, but the temperature of the burning of cement was always not up to standard, so the cement needed by border towns still had to be produced by Anna. Fortunately, after reaching adulthood, she could complete the calcination even without staying in the dusty room. Roland had a way to solve the problem of the furnace temperature not rising. For example, he could use the steam engine to blast to raise the furnace temperature, and then set up the exhaust gas circulation channel to improve the use of heat dissipation. But the production of the steam engine was also inseparable from Anna. From the key parts of the casting to the welding, everything had to be completed by her. It could be said that the current industrial products of Border Town were based on Anna's ability. Once she was gone, the so-called industrial development would be nothing more than an illusion. During the months of the demons, everything Roland had done was for emergencies, but now that the threat of the demonic beasts no longer existed, and Longsong's stronghold had provided a large number of people and funds, he naturally had to start to change this situation. Let's start from the most basic. He asked Anna to cut out a 2-finger wide, 1 mm thick piece of steel, and then picked out the previously set standard centimeter-long iron ruler, taking a small distance as the fixed length of the black line, and repeatedly arranging it until the 10 black lines were roughly the same length as the standard centimeter. Then he let the black line climb up the steel piece, and burn out a vertical mark. Under the control of the black line, the distance between each vertical mark was almost exactly the same. Chapter 136. For the past half a month, the port of Clearwater had been like a festival. Even if he was standing on the balcony at the top of the Lord's Tower, Ryan could still feel the high atmosphere in the city. The goods and people that had been moved from Eagle City had greatly expanded the strength of the port city, the looters had also reaped a great harvest, and the slave market had also become lively. After going through a series of battles, the Black Sail Fleet not only didn't suffer many losses, but instead had added a large number of slaves to act as sailors, and were currently undergoing intense training at the port. In a few days, they would head to the fjords and begin their first plunder of the year. Her Majesty the Queen had also timely issued a slave development decree. As long as these captured slaves from Eagle City were able to capture new people as replacements, they would be able to jump from slaves to the people of the port of Clearwater in one fell swoop. Presumably, with such an inspiring decree, the people of Eagle City who had been reduced to slaves would also do their best to fight. Now that Timothy had been defeated, there was no one in the Kingdom of Greycastle who could stop the Queen of Clearwater. As long as there was enough time, Garcia Wimbledon would inevitably become the master of Greycastle. Ryan thought so, but why didn't the Queen's face have a happy expression? Instead, there was a trace of lingering haze between her eyebrows. Your Majesty, the patriarchs of the Sandstone clan and the Black Bone clan are requesting an audience. A guard's voice came from outside the door. Ryan looked at Her Majesty, and seeing that the latter didn't show any expression, he shouted, "Bring them in." Whether it was resting, holding meetings, or receiving visitors, Her Majesty always liked to do so at the top of the tower. As long as the weather was right, the balcony was the place where Garcia would spend the most time. Most people weren't used to standing in mid-air, facing the slightly fishy smell of the sea breeze. The Sand Nation was no exception. The patriarch of the Sandstone clan was a petite woman, and was also the goddess of the clan. When Ryan first heard this introduction, he snorted in his heart, what goddess? She was nothing more than a fallen witch. The patriarch of the Black Bone clan was tall, his face was covered with scars, and his arms were as thick as an average person's thigh. At every meeting, there would be 3 to 4 guards surrounding him to prevent him from harming Her Majesty the Queen. The moment they stepped onto the terrace, the two patriarchs simultaneously frowned, but they quickly restrained their expressions and respectfully knelt down to the Queen of Clearwater. May the road ahead of you be filled with oases, and may the stars in the sky illuminate your path. Get up. Garcia sat down with her back against the guardrail. What do you think? Are you satisfied with your new residence? Everything's fine, Goddess Kabbalah said. There are forests and water sources in the territory. It's much more comfortable than the sand-swept iron sand city. That's all right. What are you here for? Your Majesty, last time you gave, the Black Bone Patriarch had just opened his mouth when he was interrupted by Kabbalah. It's like this, Your Majesty. After the last battle, many of the brave warriors showed signs of weakness and exhaustion. Only by regularly taking new pills would they be able to recover. However, we didn't have many pills left. I'm here to ask you to give us more pills. I also mean the same, Black Bone Patriarch said in a muffled voice as he glared at the goddess. The materials needed to make this thing are very complicated, and I don't have much left. Rest assured, when the new batch of pills is made, I will send them to you as soon as possible. But don't forget to prepare the golden dragon. If it's not enough, you can use the river Styx to pay for it. Your Majesty, forgive me for asking, Kabbalah hesitated for a moment. Do you know when the next batch will be made? I can't tell you this, Garcia said as she smoothed her hair that had been messed up by the sea breeze. Everything about the pills is a secret, so you should go back and wait patiently. Those warriors are just dispirited, nothing more. If they rest more, it won't be a big problem. The guards received Ryan's hint and came forward to surround the Sand Nation, bringing Kabbalah and Black Bone Patriarch, who still wanted to ask a few more questions. After the door to the terrace was closed, Garcia let out a soft sigh. Ryan rarely heard Her Majesty the Queen make such a sound, so he took the initiative to ask, Your Majesty, do you think it's inappropriate to let the Sand Nation settle on the southern border? If one day they become strong. No, Ryan, Garcia shook her head, I have never worried about the Sand Nation, they can't pose any threat to the port of Clearwater. The lake in that piece of land happens to be in the middle of the two clans' territories, and the upstream passes through the port of Clearwater. As long as I block half of the river, the reduced lake will make them fight among themselves. The reason why I chose Sandstone and Black Bone Patriarch is because of this, their relationship has never been harmonious. Then are you worried about the pills? Garcia didn't answer. At this moment, the guards knocked on the door and said, Your Majesty, the church priest Dekar requests an audience. Bring him in. The Queen immediately stood up, her face becoming even more gloomy. Your Majesty Garcia Wimbledon, I greet you on behalf of the Holy City. The priest stepped onto the terrace and bowed. What about the pills? Why were the first few batches delivered normally, but this batch has been delayed? Garcia asked in a cold voice. Your Majesty, please calm down, I came here for this matter. Dekar wiped the sweat from his forehead, the amount of 5,000 pills you requested to buy is too much, even if Hermes went all out to produce them, there is no way to meet your demand in a short period of time. This time I brought back a new batch, how many? Garcia interrupted. 1,000, Daika said while putting his hand on his chest, the rest will be delivered one after another. And what did you promise before? Her face became slightly better, how many do you want? Where are the pills? I will send someone to get them. In the church, I don't know if the golden dragon, I will not miss a single golden dragon, Garcia went in front of Daika and whispered in his ear, but if the rest of the pills don't arrive soon, your head will be hung on the Black Sail flagship's ram, I think the Archbishop won't shed a single tear for you. After the priest left with a pale face, she went back to the railing and looked at the distant sea line. The sea breeze lifted her long gray hair, like a flag fluttering in the wind on the mast of a fleet. You're right, I am worried about the problem of the pills. Garcia's voice seemed to be very far away, if Timothy had arrived 2 months later, I would have been more prepared, and at that time, without relying on the pills, I would have been able to defeat his King's City Knight regiment. Unfortunately, he came too soon. You've done a very good job. Ryan thought, who else could do a better job? Since occupying Eagle City, she had formulated a response plan. She had ordered people to take away the supplies and residents, while digging ditches in the city to pour black water. In the case of a shortage of manpower, she had exchanged the southern territory for the support of the Sand Nation, and then let the clan warriors who had taken the pills attack the Knight regiment from both sides. Her loyal supporters, in order to resist the last wave of overwhelming attacks, also did not hesitate to swallow the secret medicine. The secret medicine provided by the church is not, as I said, it is not harmful to life. If it is not supplemented for a long time, the person who takes the medicine will become manic and restless, and then in weakness, pain, and limb atrophy they will die. I don't care about the life and death of the Sand Nation, but the people who work for me should get the best reward. She paused. Ryan, you take some people to retrieve the pills, and then distribute them to the brave warriors. Let them split into 2 halves, so that they can last a little longer. I will obey your wishes, Your Majesty. Just as Ryan was about to leave, the guard's voice sounded outside the door for the 3rd time, Your Highness, there is a secret letter from King's City. Read it before you go, she said. Yes, Ryan took back the secret letter, skillfully cut the seal, and took out the letter paper. Most of these secret letters were information sent back by the spies lurking in various places. They were not signed, nor did they have a recipient, and the content was usually as simple and clear as possible. But when he read the first sentence, his whole body suddenly froze in place. Chapter 137. Pushing open the heavy wooden door of the secret meeting room, a light fragrance of benzoin wafted into his nose. Archbishop Maine was very fond of candles that were mixed with herbs and spices, especially in a closed room with no windows. The smell of the candle was able to make him feel at peace. The secret room was not big, and could only fit a round table and 4 chairs. The other 2 archbishops were already sitting in their seats, while the one facing the wooden door was still empty. The Pope's physical condition was deteriorating, and he hadn't appeared in front of everyone for almost half a year. Only when he encountered a difficult problem would he go to the pivotal secret area of the Hermes mechanism to personally seek an answer from the Pope. Since everyone is here, let's start. Maine inserted the door bolt and sat between the 2 people. Sir Tayfun, how is the order in the Kingdom of Eternal Winter being maintained? Except for the nobles in the capital, there are very few rebels in other places. The civilians even welcome us to take over the kingdom. Tayfun said while stroking his beard. Of course, those nobles who cling to the glory of the past and refuse to repent will be eradicated one by one. That's good. Heather licked her lips. If I were to judge them, the people would be more deeply aware of their ugly and dirty side. Unfortunately, I still have a lot of things to do here, so I can't go to the Kingdom of Eternal Winter. Maine directly ignored her words, and said to Tayfun, those vacated positions, we have to fill them as soon as possible. The Church has trained a large number of talents for this purpose, and now is the time to use them. The Kingdom of Eternal Winter is the kingdom with the greatest influence of the Church, and the smaller the waves caused, the sooner we can deal with the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Dawn. This is natural. Those fence-sitters who rely on the Church, I mean the nobles, what should we do? Heather asked. The reason why the Church can attract so many excellent believers is that we don't care about bloodline, but only look at ability. If we rashly accept those idiots, it will shake the foundation of the Church. My suggestion is. She made a gesture of cutting her neck. Leave them alone for now, wait for the situation in the kingdom to stabilize, then make it clear to them, so that we can reduce the resistance to change. Regarding this point, Maine specially consulted the Pope. The Church can provide them with the same authority as the title, but they can't inherit it to their descendants. Don't forget that we have to eliminate the royal power in the end. There is no need to be impatient, Miss Heather. Heather was born poor, and before she was taken in by the Church, she suffered from hunger and wanderings. But with her naturally sharp mind and outstanding judgment, she had walked step by step to where she was today. Maine could understand her disgust towards the nobles, but he still had to look at the bigger picture. How is Grey Castle? He asked. According to the intelligence, the new King Timothy didn't return to King City after his defeat, but went directly to the eastern region, Tayfun replied. A wise choice. Heather snapped her fingers, pulling Duke Fran to challenge the Queen of Clearwater, and after the Duke dies, immediately go to the Eastern Territory to divide up his territory to stabilize the army's morale, and while at the same time win over the other nobles. TSK, the royal family is not full of fools. In this way, we can also save a lot of trouble. Let the High Priest of Grey Castle contact him. Presumably in this kind of predicament, he won't refuse the Church's bait. The supply of medicines in Port of Clearwater will be reduced by 30% to balance the strength of the two sides. I will leave this to you, Sir Tayfun. Maine arranged. As long as 2 years pass, the whole of Grey Castle will have no usable soldiers. Rest assured, Tayfun nodded, but there is a problem in Longsong Stronghold, west of Grey Castle. What problem? After the fourth Prince Roland defeated the Duke of Ryan, he returned to Border Town. Tyler personally sent an invitation, but he didn't get a response. Does he really have no intention of fighting for the throne? Well, what do you think? Maine looked at Heather. The latter shrugged and said, what else can I think? What were the rumors about him at the beginning? Ignorant and incompetent, bad character, incompetent, greedy. I think it's impossible for such a person to capture Longsong's stronghold, right? So the answer is very simple, he deceived everyone, whether it is the nobles or us. You mean? Maine frowned. Our fight for the throne has chosen the wrong role, Sir Maine, she sneered, he should be the one standing on the stage, not the third Princess Garcia. Defeating a duke indeed proves his outstanding ability, but even if a person's talent is high, without enough resources it is meaningless. Taifun shook his head, since he chose to return to that desolate place, it means that he has given up the possibility of intervening in the situation of Grey Castle, so naturally he will not pose any threat to our plan. Yes, in theory it is so. But combined with this information, it is very interesting, Heather threw a small note, my personal information. Maine spread out the note, quickly glancing over the content, a witch? Aha, a witch organization called themselves the Witch Cooperation Association, claiming to have a firm foothold in Border Town, and calling for other sisters to go there. Although it is all groundless gossip, and should not be discussed here, but we all know that the name of the Witch Cooperation Association is not fictitious. After being hunted by the army of judges in the eastern forest, they fled all the way to the west, and finally disappeared west of Longsong's stronghold. And Border Town is just outside the western border of Grey Castle, at the foot of the impassable mountain range. Two lords, isn't this a bit too much of a coincidence? Witch Cooperation Association. Maine had a little impression of this name, they were chased and intercepted by the army of judges, and even after losing a lot of people, they still insisted on moving in the direction of the impassable mountain range. After interrogating the captured witches, they seemed to want to find the holy mountain in the barbarian land. This was a suicidal move, so he didn't put too much energy into this matter. There were several similar witch organizations in the Wolfshart Kingdom and the Kingdom of Dawn. Lurking in the city was far more dangerous than rushing to the barbarian land to die. You mean, the prince has hooked up with the witch organization? After reading the news, Taifun's face became gloomy. Maybe, maybe not. Heather raised the corner of her mouth, I'm just making a simple speculation. What are the witches most afraid of? Exposing themselves. Obviously, using the name of the Witch Cooperation Association is easier to attract the attention of the church, but they still use this name in the underground news, why? Because for us, this is a familiar name, Maine said calmly, for other witches, the same is true. Full marks. Heather clapped her hands twice, this can effectively reduce the vigilance of wild witches, maybe someone will really be attracted by this news, and set off to Border Town to find out the truth. It is hard to imagine, without the protection of the Lord, they would dare to play such a trick. We often say that the lesser of two evils is the choice. Obviously, the other side already thinks that the consequences of not being able to recruit a witch are more serious than the consequences of being exposed. At this point, her tone became gloomy, why do I feel that we are being looked down upon? This is not a matter of being looked down upon, Taifun said angrily, once the witches have a place to settle down, they can use their abilities without any worries, and it is likely that they will find that the so-called demonic bite can be avoided. This is also the reason why we have to encircle and annihilate any settled witches. Only by forcing them to constantly hide, run, and go into exile, can this secret be maintained. Maine knew that what the other side said was right, the witches themselves were not a threat to the church, but as a group, once they got rid of their evil identity, it would have a great impact on the church's propaganda, and even shake the foundation of the church's rule. He found himself in a dilemma. In the face of this kind of thing, a large number of judges should be dispatched to encircle and annihilate the witches, but Border Town was too far from Hermes, and the church's army was about to launch an attack on the Wolfshart Kingdom, so it was difficult to spare manpower to annihilate this remote town. In addition, at this critical juncture, sending a large number of troops into Grey Castle was bound to arouse the vigilance of Grey Castle and the other two countries, which may affect the subsequent annexation plan. After thinking about it again and again, he made a decision. I will send an emissary group consisting of 10 judges and a priest to Border Town to investigate this matter with the assistance of High Priest Taylor. If the behavior of the Witch Cooperation Association has nothing to do with the Lord, this group of emissaries can eliminate the witches themselves. What if it is related? Heather asked. Chapter 138. As the woodland on the south bank of the Redwater River was gradually cleared, the day of plowing was approaching. In order to facilitate people from both sides of the Redwater River, Roland ordered people to build a pontoon bridge nearly 100 meters across the river. The lower part of the bridge was made by carpenters, connected by thick hemp ropes. He also specifically told the carpenters that the two ends of the rafts should be placed at a sharp angle, so that the resistance of the water would be smaller. The hemp ropes were wound layer by layer around 4 round stakes on the shore, so that the position of the rafts was as stable as possible. In the middle of each raft, 4 long planks were laid as a bridge deck, which was about 2 meters long, allowing 4 people to pass side by side. The raft pontoon bridge was very simple to build, and its service life was not low. As long as the river did not rise or fall sharply, causing the hemp ropes to break, it could be guaranteed to last for 2 or 3 years. The trees in the concealing forest were of excellent quality. For example, the piers and pavements of Border Town's pier were processed from giant trees in the forest, and their service life was almost the same as that of Border Town. Although it creaked when walking on it, there was still no sign of it collapsing. Across the pontoon bridge to the west, the first piece of land to be reclaimed was Leaf's experimental field. Now it was surrounded by wooden planks, and the entrance was guarded by the soldiers of the First Army. These days, besides eating, attending classes, and sleeping, Leaf spent the rest of her time in the experimental field. From the window of the office on the 3rd floor, Roland could vaguely see the scene behind the wooden fence, where the wheat was growing crazily. In the morning, it was still green, but in the afternoon, it had already turned into a sea of gold. The golden ones, which relied on magic to grow, had a ripening speed of 1 seed a day. If it was seen by outsiders, they would probably kneel down and call it a miracle. Seeing that the land, population, and seeds were all ready, Roland decided to add the last link, the supervisor. He called Barav, the minister's assistant, who had recently been very busy. Your apprentices should be able to handle things on their own, right? Roland asked. I need to set up 2 new departments in the city hall. Your Highness, we don't have enough manpower. Barav said awkwardly. In the past, you would agree first, and then slowly discuss the details, but now you have learned to complain first. Roland criticized in his heart, but on the surface, he was indifferent. How could it not be enough? Didn't I just give you a batch of knight? Roland's first round of inspection selected more than 50 knight who met the requirements and could read and write. There wasn't a need for so many teachers, so only the best of the best were selected. In the end, 9 knight were chosen to be primary teachers, and the rest were assigned to City Hall to start as apprentices. Your Highness, those people are slow, lazy, and slow to react. They even make a few mistakes when copying the information. They are not qualified to be apprentices. How to discipline them is your business. Roland knocked on the table. If they don't obey the arrangement, they will be directly sent to the North Slope mine. But I must establish these 2 departments. All right, Your Highness, you have the final say, Barav said helplessly. Roland said, the first one is the Ministry of Agriculture, which is responsible for supervising the planting and production of crops in the territory. Barav was stunned. Apparently it was the first time that he heard that City Hall even managed the farming. Your Highness, isn't this kind of thing for the serfs to deal with? How they plant and how they harvest has nothing to do with us, as long as we receive the full amount of taxes. That's why you... No, I mean, in the past, the crop harvest was so low. Roland picked up the cup and drank a mouthful of water to cover up his slip of the tongue. A responsible City Hall should take care of the people's food and drink. Food and drink. Are you kidding? Of course not. The importance of food and drink is not to mention. If the people can't eat their fill, it would be a dereliction of duty of City Hall, as well as my dereliction of duty. As for the second half, isn't the public toilet project built for this purpose? He put away his relaxed tone and seriously said to Barav, I don't know how the City Hall of King's City operates. Perhaps the life and death of the civilians is of no importance to them. But in Border Town, I want to establish an all-round political organization. It must know the situation of the territory and the people like the back of its hand, so that it can obtain the wholehearted support of the people, and the decrees issued can also be carried out efficiently. Now I will tell you the composition of this department and the tasks it needs to undertake. You must remember it well. Yes, Your Highness. Bhairav wiped the sweat from his forehead. Go to the archives, find 3 or 4 people who have done farm work, and bring them into the Ministry of Agriculture. Also transfer 2 apprentices, who will be responsible for recording and statistical work. 6 people will be more or less enough. Wait. You want the civilians to serve as city hall officials? Bhairav was shocked. Not only are they obedient, but they also work hard. Why can't they serve as officials? Officials are not equal to nobles, and the Ministry of Agriculture also needs some professionals to guide the future farming. But most of them don't even know how to read. That's why I need you to first send 2 apprentices to help with the paperwork. Roland interrupted, and this situation won't last too long. I will soon implement a universal education program in the territory. The goal is to let everyone be able to read and write. When the time comes, you will no longer have to worry about a lack of manpower. Obviously, this news surprised Bhairav even more than letting the civilians into the city hall. He slightly opened his mouth, but for a long time he couldn't say a word. Roland didn't care whether he could accept it or not, and continued, back to the matter of the Ministry of Agriculture. When the serfs cultivate their own land, there will inevitably be a phenomenon of uneven levels. For example, some people plow deeper, some people sow more densely. This is an excellent opportunity for observation. The 6 people from the Ministry of Agriculture need to number the divided fields, and record every step of the serfs' farming, the depth of the plow, the sowing interval and so on. I will give them measuring tools, and teach them how to use them. You mean, comparison? Bhairav might be old-fashioned in some aspects, but his brain was still relatively fast. Yes, for the first-time farming, there is no need to care too much about the harvest. Continue to maintain food imports and use some new varieties of wheat seeds, enough to ensure that no one will go hungry. I need to find the most suitable method among these methods, write it into a manual and record it. In the future, the planting of wheat will be carried out according to this method, and the Ministry of Agriculture will be responsible for promoting, guiding, and supervising it. Roland didn't know much about farming, but this didn't prevent him from using a scientific thinking method to summarize an optimal plan. With this set of plans, whether it was to expand the area of farming or to add new farmers, the average output of the land could be maintained at a relatively high level. Bhairav nodded, then hesitated, and said, Your Highness, there is one thing I don't understand. After the serfs are promoted to free people, why do you only collect 20% of the crops as land tax? Even if you ask for 50%, you can leave 50% for them, which shows that you are very generous. Because there is no point in piling up the coins in the basement, Roland explained. After 20% is paid, I will use a fixed price to buy the rest of the grain in their hands. In Border Town, the grain trade is the exclusive business of the Lord. In this way, the castle will get food, and they will get paid. After a certain amount of savings, they will want to buy some things, such as cattle, iron farming tools, beef, cotton clothes, and good brick houses, which only I can provide. If the town's residents want to buy food, they can only buy it from the castle. So in the end, the money will still flow back into my pocket, but in this cycle, it will continue to improve everyone's living standards. Do you understand? Bhairav frowned, and didn't answer for a long time. Apparently he was in a state of puzzlement. Roland smiled and shook his head. If you don't understand, you can go back and think about it slowly, but for now, just do as I say. The assistant minister stood up in a trance, but when he reached the door, he suddenly turned around. Your Highness, you just said that you want to establish 2 departments. What is the other one? Chapter 139. Bhairav returned to his city hall office and immediately closed the door. My God, he touched the god's stone of retaliation on his chest. His Highness is really possessed by the devil. For this point, he had some faint speculations, but now he was almost sure that the person he just talked to was not the 4th prince. It was understandable for a personality change or a strange behavior, but to suddenly understand something that he had never been exposed to and master knowledge that he had never heard of? Only in mythological biographies would such a thing happen, but in the legends, it was the gods who possessed mortals and led humans out of trouble. Since when did the devil like to do this? If Roland Wimbledon ran his territory like the king's city, although it was very difficult, Berev would not be surprised. It was said that the fourth prince was ignorant and incompetent, but his character could be disguised. Maybe there were people who secretly taught him how to govern a city, or even a country. But the ideas and plans that the prince proposed were unheard of by the assistant minister. He had been in the city hall for 20 years, and as a subordinate of the Minister of Finance, he was very familiar with the structure and operation of the city hall. The ministers were responsible for various functions, and except for reaching agreements in private, they usually did not give each other any face. After the king issued a decree, the ministers who received the order would hand it over to their subordinates. Each minister had their own forces, and their style of doing things was also different. For example, the knight Steelheart, who was responsible for the defense of the Grey Castle King's city, controlled hundreds of patrols and mercenaries. He also had a lot of influence on the underground organizations in the city. When he was doing things, he would lead his men and horses on a rampage. Criminals who were targeted by him, even if they were nobles, would find it difficult to stay in the city. They either had to leave the king's city or wait to be put in prison. Not only the king's city, but other cities were also like this. So to become a lord or a subordinate of the king, one must first be a noble with a large business. If one did not have enough money to recruit subordinates, did they have to do everything by themselves? And the more people they had, the more they would be valued by the superiors, because more people made things easier. This truth was understood by everyone. But the prince's approach completely subverted Berev's concept. Be it the ministers or the subordinates of the ministers, all of them were recruited and paid by the city hall. In other words, even if a minister was no longer around, they could just replace him with a new one. They could even directly promote someone from below. This was a brand new system. Berev was sure that the prince wanted to create a political system that was completely different from the upper class of Grey Castle. Perhaps some people would think that this was just Roland's wishful thinking or the presumption of an outsider. But the assistant minister didn't think so. He picked up a quill and wrote down His Royal Highness's requests on a piece of paper. Looking at these plans, they were simply interlinked, and every detail had been considered. First of all, they had to manage their daily lives. Berev naturally knew that the stronger the control over the people, the faster the various orders issued by the Lord would be carried out. However, this also greatly increased the number of people in charge. Firstly, where could he find so many people who could read and write? Secondly, the extra salary was a heavy burden to the Lord's subordinates, and not many were willing to do so. Looking at His Royal Highness' other two rules, recruiting civilians to enter the city hall and educating all civilians. When he swept his fingers over these two lines of text, he couldn't help but shiver in his heart. If His Royal Highness's two requirements were realized, what would Border Town become? Any civilian would be able to read and write, and as long as the city hall wanted to expand, they could always find a large number of suitable personnel. And this, in turn, would promote the popularization of education. If they received an education, they would have the opportunity to enter the city hall and get a well-paid position. At the same time, it would also bring about a rise in social status. I'm afraid that in less than 1 or 2 years, everyone would take the initiative to receive an education. Even if they couldn't do it themselves, they would still want to send their children to a college. In addition, all the previously mentioned employers' salaries would be paid by the city hall, that is, the Lord Roland, so the civilians wouldn't need to spend a single copper royal to build their own team. This was tantamount to completely breaking the restriction that only nobles had the capital to serve as administrative officials. There was no doubt that only the devil could come up with such a shocking system. Berev took a deep breath and pinched the god's stone of retaliation in his hand. Now there was only one question left: could the devil also be good? If it was said that Roland was an evil person, he would be the first to stand up and disagree. The fourth prince's actions, in his eyes, could even be called the actions of a virtuous king. Even in the records of the legendary kings in the history books, none of them were as concerned about the life and death of each and every one of their people. Together with the people, he stayed in border town and spent a lot of money to buy food, so that everyone could safely pass through the months of the demons. He also brought the devil's technology and equipment for the development of the town. Even the devil's minions, the witches, were displaying their abilities to improve the lives of the people. Berev suddenly felt that even if Roland became the king of Grey Castle, it wouldn't be such a bad thing. Thinking of his father's teachings, don't say what you shouldn't say, don't ask what you shouldn't ask, he decided to first hide his findings in his heart. Since it was the devil, in the future, there would always be a conflict with the church. If the situation wasn't right, he could still be an ambush in the devil's camp to expose the truth and witness. He rang the bell, summoning Sirius Daly, who had just joined the city hall. Compared to the stupid and arrogant knight, this young man from the Wolf family was already considered outstanding, although he still had some pride as a knight, but at least he was willing to listen to his instructions. "Teacher, what's the matter?" He entered the door and saluted. His Royal Highness wants to form a new department, in charge of crop cultivation and supervision. He needs 2 apprentices to help him record the results. Berev repeated Roland's request. In addition, you go to the City Hall archives and pick 10 people who meet the requirements, and then do a screening. Although the other party is a civilian, but His Royal Highness is determined to include them in the City Hall. If some of them perform well, they may even become the head of the Ministry of Agriculture. Ah! He sighed. You first follow them to record the results. When the spring plowing is over, I will transfer you back. Teacher, you only need to screen out 2 people, he said. I am also very familiar with this field. You? Berev was stunned. Yes. Before becoming a knight, I helped my father take care of the farm, so I have a very good understanding of wheat cultivation. Sirius paused, but when His Royal Highness asked me if I had any other specialties, I didn't say it, because at that time I was worried that he would send me to the fields to work together with the serfs. Berev's heart was filled with joy. He was both educated and understood farm work, so even if a civilian joined the Ministry of Agriculture, he would still be the best candidate to be in charge. At present, Sirius was standing on his side, so if he became the head of the Ministry of Agriculture, it would be equivalent to him having influence over the Ministry of Agriculture. Very good, he said, turning this consideration into a promise of benefits. Do a good job, maybe you can climb to a higher position than before. After Sirius left, Berev leaned back in his chair and gently exhaled. Chapter 140. Shortly after the assistant minister left, the prince received a piece of good news. Sean, who had gone to the port of Clearwater to buy crop seeds, had come back. When Roland followed the messenger to the garden, he saw Sean and several other guards unloading bags from the back of their mounts. It had been almost a month since the day of his departure, and he looked a lot darker and thinner. Seeing the prince appear, Sean immediately stood up and raised his hand to salute. Roland quickly stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. Good job. What kind of seeds did you bring back? Sean squatted down and untied the bags on the ground. Pearl rice, earth eggs, candy bars, the plants you described, I bought them all in the port of Clearwater. Indeed, most of them are produced in the fjords, but the port of Clearwater already has a lot of farmland growing these crops. Did you ask the merchants how to grow them? I did, but they couldn't tell me the specific method. They also said that if these plants left the Southern Territory, it would be very difficult to grow them in other places. Sean grabbed a handful of yellow grains from the bag and spread them in front of Roland. Your Highness, this is pearl rice. The merchants said that if I bought it together with the pearl sticks, it would be cheaper. But the pearl sticks are too heavy and inconvenient to carry, so I only bought a whole one, and the rest are peeled seeds. There was no doubt that the pearl rice was the corn he was familiar with. He excitedly picked up a corn grain and put it under the sun to look at it. The fruit was somewhat shriveled. It seemed that it had been stored for a whole winter. The yield of corn was naturally much higher than that of wheat, and it also had lower soil requirements. Coupled with Leaf's transformation, it might soon replace wheat and become the main rations of Border Town. Sean untied another bag and took out a round brown crop. This is earth eggs. I ate them in the hotel in the port of Clearwater. They were cut into strips and soaked in a basin of water. They were very crispy and had a faint sweet taste. Seeing this familiar shape, Roland's heart was filled with emotion. This is clearly a potato. He used his fingers to dig away the muddy skin, revealing the dark yellow potato flesh inside. Compared with the potatoes in the future, the potatoes in this era were not big, and the color of the tubers was darker, and not every piece looked like an egg. He noticed that there were also long strips of potatoes like carrots in the bag. This thing tastes better when crushed and steamed into a paste. Ah. Your Highness, have you eaten before? Yes, I've eaten it at a banquet in the palace. Roland decided to lie, because the name, earth egg, was too unpleasant to hear. The royal chefs don't call it earth egg, they call it potato. The delicious steamed snack is called mashed potatoes. So that's how it is. As expected of your Highness, you are truly knowledgeable. Sean sighed. He opened the last package and pulled out a black stick. Your Highness, I think this crop is the most important. The honey of the port of Clearwater was very cheap, largely because of it. According to the news I heard in the tavern, more and more of their farmland is being converted to candy bars. The stalks of this magical plant are actually sweet. After cutting off the outer skin, the sugar can be squeezed out. The price is 1/10 of the honey, but it tastes as sweet as honey water. Roland wanted to say that he had also seen this crop, and conveniently changed the name to sugar cane, but after thinking about it, he decided not to. It wouldn't be too late to change the name when the people planted it. Sugar cane was the raw material for making cane sugar, and it could also be used to refine ethanol. It could be regarded as a crop that could greatly improve the happiness of the people. Think about it, the pancakes made from flour were insipid and tasteless, but if you sprinkled some white sugar and wrapped it, it could immediately improve the taste by several levels. Even a salty person like Roland would fall head over heels for it. Are there any other crop seeds? These are the ones from the port of Clearwater. He took out 5 or 6 small leather bags from his pocket and gave them to His Highness. You told me to bring back all the plant seeds that Greycastle has but Border Town doesn't. These bags were picked by me when I passed through Willow Town and Fallen Dragon Ridge. There are grapes, soybeans, cotton, flax and olive tree seeds. But the farmers said that most of the grapes are planted by inserting their branches into the ground. Although the seeds can also be planted, the germination period is very slow, and the grapes produced are not very tasty. With Leaf here, none of this is a problem, thought Roland. Now that I have the grape seeds, maybe I should try the vine version of wheat. As for soybeans, cotton, flax and olives, they were all very useful crops. First, I will let Leaf improve the seeds suitable for the Western Territory's climate and soil, and then give them to the serfs to grow on a small scale. Finally, the Ministry of Agriculture will be responsible for summarizing the improvements and writing a planting manual. Your Highness, I still have some news to report to you, Sean said in a low voice. It's about the situation in the port of Clearwater. Is it related to Princess Greycastle? Sean nodded. I stayed in the port of Clearwater for nearly 2 weeks. In addition to buying seeds, I spent the rest of my time in pubs. There are rumors that your sister Garcia Wimbledon and the Sand Nation have reached an agreement. She will provide the Sand Nation with the border of the Southern Territory, and in return, the Sand Nation will worship her as their king and obey her commands. And during my time in the port, I did see a lot of Majins on the streets. The Majins of the southernmost region. Although Border Town doesn't care about one's origin, but bringing a large number of foreigners to settle in the kingdom's territory is another matter. It seems that in order to fight for the throne, Garcia is really unscrupulous, thought Roland. The Sand Nation is also divided into many factions, and it is impossible for all of them to listen to her instructions. Do you know which clans she is trying to win over? Sean shook his head. The Sand Nation is very wary of the people of Greycastle. Even if I use the Golden Dragon, I can't buy more detailed information. But, There is one thing that is very strange. The day before I planned to leave the port of Clearwater, Garcia returned from Eagle City. Everyone in the city was celebrating their queen's victory over the false King Timothy. But the next day, there were 4 or 5 murders in the city, and one of the victims was torn into several pieces on the street. The port of Clearwater was then put under lockdown, so I had to stay there for 3 more days. The pubs were all closed, so everyone gathered in the hotel lobby to talk about this matter. Some people said it was the false king's revenge, while others said it was the Sand Nation's doing. One of the merchants from the fjords said that he had witnessed one of the murders with his own eyes. The perpetrator wasn't tall, and obviously wasn't a Sand Nation, but his strength and speed weren't something a normal person could have. The security team that heard the news was completely annihilated by him, and even though he was stabbed several times, and blood flowed all over the ground, he was still indifferent. It wasn't until more and more security team members arrived that they were able to kill him with their shields and spears. Later, the lockdown was lifted, and I didn't dare to stay any longer, so I immediately took a merchant ship and rushed back. You did a good job, Roland thought for a moment. You don't have to return the golden dragon to the city hall after buying the seeds, just consider it your reward. Thank you for your reward, your highness. His strength and speed are far beyond that of an ordinary person, and he can ignore the pain caused by the knife wounds. It sounds like the church's pills. After the guard left, Nightingale's voice sounded in his ears. Chapter 141. In the evening, Roland sat in his office and began to think about his new equipment. The pills that appeared in the port of Clearwater gave him a strong sense of crisis. Regardless of why the church wanted to support him and Garcia to compete for the throne, just thinking about the thousands of troops under Garcia's control made his scalp tingle. Thinking about the thousands of iron warriors running on foot, with an unstoppable momentum, he was afraid that the thin line of guns would be difficult to stop. As long as one of them rushed into the line, the First Army would suffer heavy losses. Fortunately, this kind of pill could not provide immunity to damage. The user was still flesh and blood. He needed a weapon with a higher rate of fire and accuracy, so that he could continuously fire from a longer distance. Without mercury fulminate as a primer, Roland had to find a way to bypass this hurdle, and first produce a batch of replacement equipment to deal with the possible outbreak of a crisis. But Anna's new ability gave him great confidence. Now as long as he could draw the design, Anna could accurately process it, and the efficiency was amazing. Compared to the previous time when she relied on a blacksmith's hammer to forge flintlock parts, she could now stack several plates together and cut them into shape at the same time. Universal education and unified weights and measures were preparation for large-scale industrial production, but it did not mean that she would not take shortcuts. Anna's new ability was simply a treasure, with endless potential to be unearthed. Roland now went to the North Slope Mountain every afternoon to study the use of the black fire with her. If he really had no time, he would let her practice her control ability, carving some gadgets, such as a witch figurine. Although at present her skill in carving figurines was still very immature, but Roland believed that one day, his bookcase would be filled with all kinds of witch figurines, probably. He picked up a steel ruler and pressed it on the parchment, then he heard a knock on the door. If the guards did not inform him, then it was most likely a witch. But at the moment, most of the witches were in the living room on the first floor with Scroll, learning how to recognize words and arithmetic, so there was only one witch who did not need to participate in the basic teaching. Come in. Sure enough, the one who pushed the door open was Anna. She gently closed the door and walked to Roland's desk, holding a gold-rimmed book in her arms. The fact that Anna was able to borrow the Book of Illusion, which she could only conjure once a day, before the start of class proved that even though Anna didn't like to talk much, she was surprisingly popular among the witches. Thinking of Nana, who used to follow behind her like a little tail, perhaps she was born with the charm to attract witches. What's wrong? Did you encounter a difficult problem? Yes. She nodded and opened the book in front of Roland. Here. You said that everything in the world is made up of small balls, and these small balls are all different, but you also mentioned that they can turn into waves? Anna asked, what is a wave? When you throw a stone into the water, the shock it causes is a wave. The prince coughed twice. This is just a concept. You just need to look at it. There is no need to delve into it. Why? Because I don't understand it myself. Roland didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The microscopic quantum field was a mysterious thing. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have written this part of the book. Although he thought so, he couldn't say it out loud. Because the small balls have the characteristics of waves, and they also have the characteristics of matter. We, who are made up of small balls, are the same, but our mass is too large, so it is difficult to observe the waves. As for the deeper reason, it still needs to be explored by countless generations of people. He thought for a moment, then added, because this phenomenon has a considerable conflict with common sense, it is very difficult to understand, just like in a three-dimensional world, it is difficult for us to imagine a four-dimensional space. You don't need to take it to heart. Anna curled her lips, seemingly not satisfied with Roland's explanation, but she quickly asked, what is a four-dimensional space? When she stopped asking, the prince's mouth was already dry. He really underestimated Anna's desire for knowledge. If this went on, he would have nothing to teach her. Especially when Roland asked her about her progress in mathematics, she replied with a relaxed face, that's much simpler. Now I'm looking at equations and matrices, it's quite interesting. Much simpler, quite interesting. Roland suddenly felt that the gap between people was really too big. How long had it been? In a week, she had learned from simple elementary functions to matrix equations, and now it was time to learn calculus. In school, Anna would definitely be a daunting top student. Also, she was a very beautiful top student. Roland looked at the woman who was looking down at the book, and for a moment, he was lost in thought. Her thin bangs rested on her forehead, and a few strands of hair fell naturally on her cheeks. He couldn't help but stretch out his index finger, pull up the ends of her hair, and gently put it behind her ear. She turned her head and looked at Roland, with a smile in her eyes. The lake blue pupils were no longer as calm as still water, but ripples. They looked at each other at such a close distance until Anna opened her mouth and said something. There was no sound, only the movement of her lips. Roland was still able to read her lips. Nightingale is not here now. The meaning of this sentence couldn't be more straightforward. Roland felt that it would be too stupid if he pretended not to understand. The room was so quiet that he could almost hear the others' breathing and heartbeat. As he approached, Anna closed her eyes, and a blush appeared on her cheeks. Roland smelled the faint fragrance from her body, and gently kissed her lips. A soft feeling came through the touch, and time seemed to freeze at this moment. He didn't know how long it took for them to separate. Before he could say anything, Anna stood on tiptoe and let their lips touch again. Hey, hey. Mystery Moon sat cross-legged on the bed, closed her eyes, and meditated. She raised her hands high and murmured. What's wrong with you? Lily asked with a frown, wrapping a towel around her wet hair. I'm imagining myself as a particle. She opened her eyes and said, I'm a particle. Then she pointed at Lily and said, you're also a particle. Crazy. The latter rolled her eyes and got into the soft quilt. Oh, no. Mystery Moon sighed, I clearly think of everything around me as a particle. Why can't I evolve into a new ability like Anna? Because you don't believe it at all. Lily said. I believe it. You don't believe it. She shook her head, the only thing people can't deceive is themselves. Although I don't know the reason, Anna probably believed the prince's words unconditionally from the beginning. Of course, she's much smarter than you, which is the key reason why she can get a new ability. Anyway, don't think about it. Go to sleep. Lily spread out her hands. Don't you want to have such an ability? Mystery Moon pouted, I also want to do more things for the prince. Evolve to keep food fresh for a longer time. She yawned, I'm not interested. Besides, why do you want to do more things for him? Men are ruthless and fickle. Echo is an example in front of you. You say you're not interested, but you were so focused in class. Mystery Moon muttered, except for Leaf, you're the most serious. Chapter 142. More than half a month had passed since the capture of Longsong Stronghold, and the population and materials sent by the 5 families of the western region had all arrived. After the establishment of the Ministry of Agriculture, the New Year's spring plowing finally began, which was also the first step for Roland to explore farming techniques. The serfs saw the dawn of being promoted to free people, so they worked in full swing. On the south bank of the Redwater River, the scene of a supervisor whipping the serfs to urge them to work had basically disappeared. Some serfs found that even if they were lazy, there was no one to control them. According to the city hall officials who used strange tools to measure the fields, the Lord didn't care about the harvest of 1 or 2 fields. In the future, the serfs would be farming for themselves, and the more they farmed, the more they would get. It was not because the quality of the officials of the Ministry of Agriculture was so good that they had completely understood the principle of distribution according to work, but because Roland asked them to constantly repeat these contents to the serfs. In order to strengthen the effect of indoctrination, as well as to satisfy the prince's own feelings, the banks of the Redwater River were also filled with red flags and banners, on which were written slogans such as, "Labor is the only way to get rich," "Labor is glorious," "Labor leads to freedom," "Labor changes fate," and so on. Of course, these measures were not without objections. For example, Barav was the first to stand up and oppose. "Your Highness, it is meaningless to do this, the majority of serfs are illiterate, they do not care what is written on the banners. These people are stupid and ignorant, sometimes even a whip does not work, let alone some seemingly inexplicable words." And Roland's answer was also very simple, those banners are not for them to see. Then why do you still do these things? At that time, the expression of the assistant minister seemed to be quite confused. In order to create a living example. He never thought that serfs were stupid and could not be reformed, they were not educated, but it did not mean that they did not have ideas. Even the most stupid people would be driven by desires and interests, this was human nature. The repeated indoctrination of the commissioner of the Ministry of Agriculture seemed to have little effect, but it would leave a primer in their hearts, like a trickle of water that would eventually converge into one. When the first batch of serfs were promoted to free people, when they exchanged their harvest crops for money to buy high-quality clothes, exquisite food, and even sturdy and warm brick houses, the slogan that was repeated over and over again would suddenly become a reality and be deeply imprinted in their hearts. As for the banners on the shore, they were for the townspeople who had received universal education. Relying on their own hands to get rid of poverty and become an official member of border town, they might even surpass themselves as natives. This was the power of hard work. Only by comparing could one feel the difference. Only by taking the initiative to pursue would one be able to display the highest efficiency. Tai Tu stood at the entrance of the mine, waiting for the next batch of ores to come out. Ever since the months of the demons, when the high-temperature steam had burned half of his face, he no longer dared to stand near this black machine. Fortunately, in Border Town, there was still Miss Nana, who was as kind as an angel. Tai Tu touched his cheek, which was as good as new, and sighed with emotion. To think that she even suspected that the other party was the devil's minion, it was simply blasphemy to her. After winter ended, he brought 2 salted fish and a wild boar leg to the Pine family to apologize. What surprised him even more was that although Pine was a viscount, he didn't have the habit of looking down on others like the nobles and accepted his apology generously. For the first time, Ironhead felt that the nobles were not all cold-blooded people. Old Iron, a miner covered in dust, ran out of the cave. "The rope has been tied." Well, he turned to the direction of the steam engine and shouted, "Everyone stay away. Frank, lift up the green lever, then press down on the red lever. If you make a mistake, I'll twist your head off." "Don't worry, Old Iron, leave it to me," Frank replied loudly. After sending Nail to join the border town's first army, Tai Tu changed someone to operate the steam engine. In the first few days, Frank often made mistakes in the order of the lever, which led to the explosion of the air supply pipe. Fortunately, His Royal Highness didn't care about this matter. Not only did he send someone to replace the damaged parts, he also didn't punish them. Originally, Tai Tu had already prepared for everyone to be fined a month's salary. With the opening of the inlet valve, the steam engine spewed out majestic white gas. The main wheel slowly rotated, driving the capstan to stretch the hemp rope. All of you, keep your spirits up. Look at the hemp rope, look carefully. Tai Tu shouted. Now, in addition to the steam engine, the mine's mining method had also changed. His Royal Highness ordered the craftsmen to cut the pieces of wood into long strips, connecting them from end to end in the mine, and then put the 2 wooden strips under the wooden squares. At first glance, it looked like a lot of wooden lattices. His Royal Highness called it the Wooden Rail Transport System, which was a very tongue-twisting name. It didn't seem complicated, but with a special mining cart, hey. That was really nimble. Usually, it would take 3 or 4 days to transport the ore, but with several mining carts connected together, the steam engine could drag it all out in one breath. Tai Tu had specifically observed this kind of 4-wheeled trailer running on the wooden rails. Its whole body was made of iron, which alone was worth a lot of money. The reason it could move on the narrow wooden rails without falling was because of its wheels. The inside of each small iron wheel had a circle of enlarged wool flange, which firmly confined the mining cart to the wooden rails. On top of the wheels was placed a square iron basin, which had a groove at the front and back, so that it could be strung together with hemp rope. He couldn't help but admire His Royal Highness's intelligence. With such a simple design, it actually made transporting ore so easy. But before that, the most time-consuming and laborious task was to drag the dead ore out of the mine. However, this system was not perfect. For example, on the 5th day of use, 2 sections of the wooden rails were crushed, and a few more were destroyed one after another. Later, His Royal Highness wrapped the top of all the wooden rails with a layer of iron. In addition, there was also a hemp rope accident in the mine. Iron Axe still had a lingering fear when he thought about it. Originally, when transporting ore out of the mine, only 4 mining carts could be dragged at a time. On the day of the accident, the miners were greedy for speed, so they connected all 6 mining carts together. As a result, halfway through, the hemp rope, which was as thick as an arm, suddenly burst. The rebounding part swept a man standing next to Tai Tu, breaking his arm in 2 and breaking several of his ribs. The mining cart slid down the track, knocking down 2 people and crushing the legs of an unlucky man. Fortunately, Tai Tu knew what to do when encountering such an accident. He immediately organized people to transport the injured to Viscount Tigu's house. As long as they didn't die on the spot, Miss Nana would be able to heal them. "Old Iron, the cart is coming out." The man who was staring at the entrance shouted. "Frank, after 10 breaths, turn off the steam engine, pay attention to the order." Tai Tu loudly ordered. "Okay." The 4 mining carts slowly stopped at the end of the wooden track. He walked over and recorded the quantity and variety of the carts. The first 2 carts were filled with reddish-brown stones, which were the most commonly produced thing in the mine, iron ore. The 3rd cart was filled with gray and yellow stones, which should be copper ore. When he saw the 4th cart, he was stunned. It seemed that there were no such stones in the previous records. They were dark brown and reflected a dim metallic luster under the sunlight. Chapter 143. The sailboat from Longsong's stronghold slowly docked at the pier of border town. After the gangplank was lowered, the people on the boat, carrying all kinds of luggage, walked down the pier. Most of them set foot on this strange land for the first time, so they looked a little confused, and the urging of the sailors behind them intensified their sense of uneasiness. Under the pushing and shoving of the crowd, a middle-aged woman accidentally slipped, lost her balance, and was about to fall off the pier. Another woman was 1 step ahead, grabbed the woman's wrist, and helped her stabilize her body. Thank you," the rescued woman covered her chest with a lingering fear and repeatedly thanked her. The woman just smiled and waved her hand, indicating that it was a small matter. Phil and Schilt, who was waiting at the pier, recognized the vigorous young woman in the crowd at a glance, the future flower of the Longsong Stronghold Theater, Irene, his beloved wife. She was wearing a white dress, and her long hair was coiled on top of her head, looking so beautiful and refined. The first night suppressed his excitement, and when she safely stepped on land from the pier, he quickly stepped forward and hugged her from the side, completely ignoring the surrounding people's eyes and comments. She was shocked, but after recognizing that it was Philin, she also gently responded to his hug. I was really scared when I heard the news of the defeat of the Duke's army. When I was in Longsong Stronghold, I wanted to see you, but I didn't have the opportunity. She whispered in the knight's ear, fortunately, you are safe. I was locked in the dungeon of the Lord's castle, and the guards couldn't let you in. Philin released his wife. How have you been for more than half a month? She was silent for a moment. I left the theater. Philin immediately understood the meaning of his wife's words. When he was still the first knight of the Western region, only the Duke dared to touch her, but now he was a prisoner of His Royal Highness. The group of guys who coveted Irene no longer needed to hide their malice, and were ready to take action one by one. At this time, going to the theater to work was undoubtedly sending a sheep to the tiger's mouth. It's okay. I have a job here, and the pay isn't low. He comforted her. Let's go home and talk. Home? Irene looked a little surprised. Don't we have to live separately? Generally speaking, captives who were not executed and were not ransomed were mostly used as coolies. Their living quarters were basically tents and barracks. Many of them were huddled together, lying on the ground covered with wheat stalks as beds. The treatment of the captives' families was also not much better. The women had their own special camp and also had to sleep on the ground. When the men were working, they had to clean up the men's residence, boil water, cook, and wash clothes. Thinking of this, Philin felt a little touched. At the Stronghold farm, she at least had a spacious room with a comfortable bed and a soft blanket. But for herself, she still chose to come to Border Town alone. Even if she had to squeeze into a small house or tent with other women, and accept forced labor every day, she still didn't flinch. I'm now a teacher. He took Irene's luggage, took her hand, and walked towards the new civilization district. And teachers can get a free house. To tell the truth, when he first heard His Highness announce the treatment of teachers, he didn't expect too much. As a captive, having a house was already good enough. Even if it was a leaky wooden house, he should be able to live in it after repairing it himself. But to his surprise, the housing assigned to the teachers turned out to be so formal. Walking into the community, the streets suddenly became spacious. The ground was covered with gray gravel, which was pressed flat by the rolling stones. Walking on it didn't feel uncomfortable at all. At first, Philin didn't understand this practice. He thought that the stonemasons were wasting manpower and time. It wasn't until after a heavy rain, when the rainwater flowed into the ground through the cracks in the stones, and then into the deep drainage ditches on both sides, that he understood the reason. Compared to the muddy alleys of Longsong Stronghold when it rained, this street was obviously much better. Irene looked around, and asked with some doubt, the houses here seem to be newly built. Did you go the wrong way? No, dear, we're almost there. After turning 2 corners along the street, Philin, Schilt and Irene stopped in front of a 2-story brick house. It's here. Where? She looked left and right, and then her eyes fell on the new building in front of the knight. She covered her mouth in disbelief. Is this whole house our home? Of course not, he laughed. This is the teacher's building. Our home is in the middle of the 2nd floor. Come, let's go up. Taking out the key to open the door, Philin took his wife's hand and walked into the new house. This house consisted of a main hall, 2 bedrooms, and 2 auxiliary rooms, which were fully furnished. Although it wasn't big, it unexpectedly made people feel comfortable. Whether it was the decoration of the main hall or the layout of the bedrooms, it was refreshing. Now with Irene, this home was even more perfect. Oh my God, were you really captured as a prisoner? Irene couldn't wait to run into each room to check carefully. She was as excited as a child. Are we going to live here from now on? Yes, of course. Philin smiled and took out bread and cheese from the cupboard, placing them on the table. You haven't eaten on the ship, have you? Fill your stomach first, I have to go out to work later. By the way, you're a teacher now. Irene ran back to her husband's side. Which noble child are you going to teach? Not the nobles, but the subjects of His Royal Highness. Subjects? She was startled. Teach what? Philin picked up a book on the table and handed it to his wife. Teach them to read and write. This is the teaching material that His Royal Highness gave me. When he chose to become a teacher, he was worried that he wouldn't be qualified. After all, this position was generally held by a knowledgeable white-haired old man. But His Royal Highness didn't care and said that he could teach according to the teaching material. When he saw this so-called teaching material, he realized that teaching people to read and write could also be detailed to such a degree. From the teaching method to the course content, everything was written on it. The first page also listed more than 10 common questions and answers for novice teachers, such as how to become an excellent teacher, how to attract students' interest in learning, how to test the teaching effect. The answers were simple and easy to understand, giving people a feeling of sudden enlightenment. Before the class had even started, he was already deeply attracted by this book. Irene was obviously the same. Growing up in the theater, she had read more books and plays than Philin. The knight once sighed, with his wife's appearance and intelligence, if she was born into a noble family, she would definitely become an outstanding woman known throughout the Western Territory. After turning a few pages, Irene suddenly looked up and asked, You said before, the teacher's salary is not bad, 20 silver royals a month, and every year it will increase by 5. There is no theater here, right? No, there is. Philin hesitated. He had already guessed his wife's thoughts. Chapter 144. North Slope Mine, the backyard of the firing room. Nightingale picked up the glass on the table and raised it over her head. The crystal-clear glass shone under the light, without any impurities. She knew that this glass was called a crystal glass. The firing process and formula had always been the top-secret information of the Royal Alchemy Workshop. The value of the goblet in her hand was about the same as a golden dragon. Crystal glassware with exquisite silver tableware had always been a favorite of the great nobles and wealthy merchants to show off their wealth. But now, these crystal containers brought from the palace would soon be turned into raw materials for smelting. Your Highness, you're not burning a glass, you're burning a golden dragon. Nightingale exclaimed. I don't have time to study how to burn the sand into colorless glass, so I have to make do with this method. Roland threw a beautifully shaped crystal pot into the furnace made of Anna's black fire. Nightingale still remembered that the prince had used it to fill ale, during the afternoon tea in the castle garden and during the celebration banquet of the months of demons. She could not help but feel a burst of pity. Under a stable high temperature, the pot quickly softened, and then turned into a sticky paste. Using sand, to burn glass? Anna asked, are they the same substance? Well, the main components are similar, but the sand contains a lot of impurities, so the burnt glass is mostly brown and green, which does not meet the requirements. So, the glass is pure sand? Roland smiled. You can think of it that way. When I write this part of the knowledge in a book, you will understand how those small balls form the substance. Anyway, I won't understand. Nightingale curled her lips. Besides, the different color of the glass does not affect the function of the container. Anyway, you are not using it as a cup. Why do you have to use a transparent crystal cup? She went to Anna's side and looked at the glassware that had been recast. Although they still looked colorless and transparent, their appearance was far different from the previous crystal cups. Some looked like a tube, with a round bottom, thin and long. Some were like bottles, with the bottom as big as a kettle, and the top was only as thick as a thumb. The strangest thing was a tube that was bent into the shape of a horseshoe. There was no seal on either side, so it couldn't even be used as a container. What are you planning to do with these crystal glassware? Nightingale couldn't help but ask. It's not for me, it's for the future alchemists of Border Town to use. Roland used a glass rod to stir the mucus in the black fire. They can use these vessels to extract some acids and alkali, and produce the chemicals needed for my new weapons. Sour. Alkali. Chemicals. Nightingale blinked her eyes and found that she couldn't understand what His Royal Highness was saying at all. This kind of feeling made her a little depressed. But if she asked them one by one, it would be too ignorant. She didn't want to expose this side of her in front of Anna, so she could only focus on the only nouns that she could understand. How could there be an alchemist in this town? Even Longsong Stronghold doesn't have an alchemy workshop. You can only find an alchemist in Redwater City, and I heard that their salary is higher than that of a lord's minister. It's very difficult to recruit them by relying on the Golden Dragon. You really know a lot, Roland responded with a smile. That's right. The people I sent are already on their way to Redwater City, and they'll get the news in about 2 weeks. But I'm not using the Golden Dragon to recruit them, but some alchemy secrets. As for whether I can recruit them or not, I'm not sure, but I have to try. The first half of His Royal Highness's praise immediately dispelled Nightingale's depression. She returned to the center of the courtyard with satisfaction, picked up a pastry placed on the round table, and stuffed it into her mouth. Since Roland changed the main experimental site from the castle's backyard to the firing room in North Slope Mountain, the afternoon tea had also been moved here. On the round table were the palace snacks that His Royal Highness had asked the chef to make. For example, this pastry called steamed bun. The outer skin was made of wheat flour, and she didn't know how it was processed, but it was very soft. It was also wrapped with a ball of minced meat, which contained juice. It wasn't like bacon, which was hard and difficult to swallow. As long as she bit down, the minced meat would blend with the gravy. Nightingale put her fingers into her mouth and sucked them one by one, then leaned back on the recliner, feeling a little sleepy. It seemed that she was getting lazier and lazier recently. The afternoon sun shone on her body, and the warmth slowly surrounded her like water. The rustling of the leaves in the spring wind made her feel very peaceful. She took off her shoes, curled up her legs, and lay on her side. From this point of view, she could see the side door leading to the gunpowder production room in the backyard. There was also a gauze curtain hanging over the door, which was probably used by His Royal Highness to prevent her from sneaking in. Thinking of this, Nightingale felt a little funny. Whether it was the wall of the courtyard or the outer wall of the production room, for her, they were all flat ground that she could freely walk through. She had also entered this mysterious room, and when His Royal Highness explained the production method, she quietly listened to him, but she didn't take away the finished gunpowder. But the other side thought that he had done it secretly, and didn't know that he was the one who was kept in the dark. Nightingale moved her head and looked at Anna. Anna was holding a freshly fired flat-bottomed cup, and was talking with His Royal Highness, looking very serious and focused. For this talented woman who came from a common family, Nightingale's heart was full of admiration. The reason why the Sisters of the Witch Cooperation Association were able to get rid of the fate of being homeless and miserable, and free from the torture of the magic bite, was to a large extent because of Anna. If she hadn't changed the prince's view of witches, all the subsequent twists wouldn't have happened. If His Royal Highness really wanted to marry a witch as his wife, then Anna was almost the only candidate she could think of. Although there was a trace of expectation in her heart, Nightingale chose to bury it deep in the bottom of her heart. Most of the time, just staying by His Royal Highness' side made her very satisfied. She closed her eyes, and her mind couldn't help but come up with a picture. Roland was enthroned in the palace hall, wearing a golden crown and holding a jeweled scepter, walking towards the castle balcony, accepting the admiration and cheers of the people. At his side, a woman wearing a white satin dress walked hand in hand. It was Anna. Her head was also wearing a glittering golden crown, covered with a veil, smiling and waving to the people. Lightning hovered in the air, sprinkling bright red rose petals, and in the distance, a melodious bell came from the king's city clock tower. She and her other sisters stood on the side, applauding and sending their blessings. An increasingly strong feeling of sleepiness spread throughout her body, and her consciousness gradually became hazy. Roland turned around, opened the woman's veil, and lowered his head to kiss her lips. The final scene became very blurred, and as the veil fell, Nightingale vaguely saw that the woman with closed eyes was herself. Chapter 145. Theo walked into a pub. The hot and humid smell mixed with the aroma of wine assailed his nostrils. Under the dim light, the men took off their shirts, revealing their sweaty backs, sitting at the table in the center, pouring cup after cup of poor quality beer into their mouths, talking and laughing loudly with their companions. Maids wearing revealing clothes were interspersed between the tables, filling the glasses of the guests. He looked around a little and found his target, a small man sitting in an inconspicuous corner, with a withered wild rose in front of him. Theo went to the bar and ordered a glass of beer first. He slowly savored the bitter taste, and at the same time, he looked around to see if anyone was secretly watching this short man. The result was very satisfactory. Although there were occasionally people looking at the corner, most of them were unintentional. Only one person sitting at the big table in the center, under the cover of a glass, would observe the movements in the corner. One person to contact, one person to look after, this was the usual behavior of the black street rats, which was consistent with Theo's understanding. Another glass, he shouted to the bartender, ice. Sir, the price of ice beer is doubled, the bartender reminded him. Theo threw a silver royal, the colder the better. Holding a glass of white mist, he went to the opposite side of the small man and poured the beer on the wild rose at the table. The cold wine flowed along the curled petals. The other side looked up with an impatient face. You don't want to drink the wine, instead you pour it on the table, are you crazy? To Rose, Theo smiled and sat down opposite him. I've been looking for you for a long time. That only proves that you're not looking for the right person, he said snappily. Since you're a customer, say, what do you want from me? Asking for clues, stealing, redeeming lost property, or selling stolen goods? None of them. I hope you can help me spread a rumor. This is not within the scope of Rose's business, he shook his head. No, as long as the Golden Dragon can pay, you will be interested, Theo said, shaking his finger. I'm not a layman, young man. Sometimes, in order to make the prey take the bait, and rumors are the best bait. Without evidence, there is no way to catch them. It's much safer than stealing. That sounds reasonable. The man sat up straight and smiled. Have you asked Rose for help before? I've asked someone from the same trade as you, a small place. Their names aren't as elegant as yours, and there aren't many things they can do. If the scope of business is too small, it will be very difficult to find a suitable business. It's Silver City, after all. The competition is really fierce. He picked up the wild rose and shook it, then put it in his pocket. Tell me, what kind of rumors do you want to spread? It's about the witches, Theo smiled. An organization called the Witch Cooperation Association has found the Holy Mountain in the Western Territory, and has gotten rid of the suffering of the demon's bite, obtaining eternal peace. Bro, this news is really... The short man smacked his lips. Really old-fashioned. Although I rarely teach my customers how to deceive others, your rumors should at least be a little more believable. Let me guess, if you don't want to kidnap witches, then you want to kill the church. If it's the latter, you will only wait for the army of judges to send you to the gallows, so I think it should be the former. He showed a wretched smile. Unfortunately, as far as I know, most of the people who want to catch witches and sell them for money are dead. Although they all carry a god's stone of retaliation, those women are not idiots. Why is it not credible? Theo asked curiously. An organization formed by witches is simply like the moon in the night sky. If it is true, the church will certainly flock to it. If I were a witch, I would naturally not go to that kind of place, and if it is false, then there is no need for me to go there. As for getting rid of the demon's bite, bro, are you serious? Witches are the incarnation of the devil, such a big lie, I'm afraid they will scoff at it. Then spread it according to this statement, Theo said without taking it seriously. The customer has the final say, the short man shrugged. In any case, I already reminded you. The cost is 20 golden dragon stones. Paid in one go. That's right, Rose does not take a deposit, nor does she collect the balance. He spread his hands and said, the transaction is entirely voluntary. Theo sighed, took out a leather bag from his pocket, and poured 19 golden dragon stones on the table. He also grabbed a fingernail-sized silver wolf from his waist bag, counted out 100 of them, and pushed them in front of the short man. The latter only needed to identify the authenticity of the golden dragon stones, and then swept them all into the cloth bag. With the money in hand, the short man's expression relaxed a lot. Rose promised to do very few things. Didn't I tell you before, the competition in Silver City is very fierce. If we deceive our customers, our reputation will also decline. If you are not in a hurry to go back to the western region and wait for the fish to take the bait, you can stay here for a few more days, and before long, you will hear the news spread everywhere. Will it also reach the ears of the witches? Of course, but whether they are willing to go or not is another matter. In short, I wish you success. If you catch one and sell it to the church, you will be able to earn back your capital, and if you sell it to the nobles, you can earn even more. Of course, if you can't find a way to get rid of it, and are afraid of being discovered by the church, you can come to us. We will only charge you 10% of the referral fee. The short man snapped his fingers, took the cloth bag and left. After a while, the big man who was responsible for taking care of them also got up and left. After waiting for about a quarter of an hour, Theo drank the rest of the wine in his glass, burped, and walked out of the tavern. In this way, the task given to me by His Highness Roland has been completed, he thought. Fallen Dragon Ridge, Redwater City, and Silver City, he went all over, found the local black street rats, and spread the news. Every city had a group that mingled in the dark corners, and even with the tacit consent of the Lord, they would form an orderly and hidden organization. Even Greycastle King City was no exception. What they could do was far more than what they openly said. As for the specific extent, it mainly depended on the number of Golden Dragon customers. The only difficulty in this matter was to establish a connection with the rats. He had to say, as an outsider, it was quite difficult to gain the trust of the other party. Just the secret words he had to say had cost him no less than 5 Golden Dragon coins. Theo sighed in his heart. If he hadn't had a similar experience in King City, he was afraid that he wouldn't have been able to leave Fallen Dragon Ridge. On the way back to the hotel, he noticed a trace of a strange atmosphere. He was being followed. Although the other party was very covert, as a professional guard, Theo was still aware of the other party's existence. He took out the dagger from his waist, and turned into an alley on the side. Is it Rose? When he was paying, he deliberately turned the money bag upside down, and poured out 19 Golden Dragon coins, in order to avoid attracting covetous eyes. Generally speaking, hundreds of silver royals would not make them do something like robbing customers. With his back against the wall, he counted the approaching footsteps. When the other party was about to pass through the alley, he fiercely rushed out, and in the blink of an eye, the dagger was pressed against the other party's neck. Don't move! Theo shouted in a low voice. He didn't expect that the other party would suddenly turn into a cloud of mist and disappear. Chapter 146. When Theo regained consciousness, he felt a stabbing pain in the back of his neck. Damn, this group of women is really ruthless. He opened his eyes and tried to move, only to find that his hands were firmly tied behind his back, and his feet were tied to the legs of the chair. He's awake, a woman's voice came into his ear. Your name? A woman came in front of him and lifted his chin. I suggest that you don't lie, otherwise tomorrow you will become a floating corpse in the moat. Theo blinked his eyes. The woman in front of him was wearing a veil, and her whole body was covered with a robe. Obviously she didn't want him to see her appearance. Theo, he answered truthfully, while quietly looking around. It was a narrow room, surrounded by dusty plaster statues. Some were complete, and some were obviously only half-carved. The accumulated dust had turned the plaster into a gray-brown color, as if it had been abandoned for a long time. There were no windows in the room, so he couldn't see the sky, so he couldn't estimate the time. The only light source came from an oil lamp on the wall. From Fallen Dragon Ridge to Silver City, you are so tireless, the woman said coldly. What do you want from us? I'm not looking for you, the Witch Cooperation Association is looking for you. What is the Witch Cooperation Association? It's a witch organization just like you. I was entrusted by them to spread the news. Nonsense, she snapped. I don't know where you heard this name, but the Witch Cooperation Association is far away in the sea-windward region of the eastern region. Do you think that just because you casually use a name, we will believe it? The woman pulled out a dagger from her waist. Theo found that it was the same one he had used before. I'll give you one last chance, don't challenge my patience. What I said is true. He said in a suppressed voice. They originally planned to go to the impassable mountain range to find the Holy Mountain, but now not only have they found the Holy Mountain, but they have also settled down in Border Town. The symptoms of the demonic bite have also disappeared, so they want to save more witches. I swear I'm not lying. Then why did they look for you? Because I helped them. When a member of the Witch Cooperation Association was being chased by the church's army of judges, I helped her distract the pursuers. Their tutor is Kara, Vendi, and Scroll. They asked me to come here. The masked woman was silent for a moment. Then, she put the dagger back on her waist and walked behind him. Soon, Theo heard two people whispering behind him. Fledglings, he said to himself. These two were good at sneak attacks, but they were complete novices at interrogations. The biggest taboo in an interrogation was to only give one chance to make a choice. If the interrogator was not given an answer, it was easy to force the interrogator into a dead end, to kill or not to kill. If he killed them, he would lose the possibility of obtaining information. If he didn't kill them, it would be equivalent to failing to fulfill the threat he had personally stated. This would seriously damage the dignity of the interrogator, and the effectiveness of the next threat would be greatly reduced. If he were to interrogate them, he would definitely start from the fingers. Every time they lied, he would cut off a finger. In this way, even if there was a mistake in judgment, it would not be a big problem. The threat of doing what he said would cause the enemy's morale to collapse quickly. It would be difficult for someone without professional training to survive such an interrogation. He pretended to be frightened, which would make the other side skeptical, and at the same time expose the fact that they had no ability to distinguish whether he was lying or not. Kara, the Holy Mountain, and the Witch Cooperation Association's information were all true and reliable, which would further strengthen the persuasiveness of his own information. Not long after, the masked woman appeared in front of him again. When did they arrive in the Western Territory? 2 or 3 months before the months of the demons. After the end of winter, they returned to Border Town and claimed that they had found the Holy Mountain. How many people are there? 40 or so. I'm not very clear about this, except for Kara, the other witches rarely appear. Theo decided to add a little more bargaining chip. Have you heard of Kara the Snake Witch? Her ability is to summon a magic snake, one of which is called Nothingness, which can quickly remove any poison. I have seen it with my own eyes. It is very magical. You are not afraid of witches? The woman's tone showed some doubt. Why should I be afraid? The witches of the Witch Cooperation Association are very beautiful. They are not demonic beasts baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, and they have never hurt ordinary people. If I were afraid, I wouldn't have run so far to help them spread the news. If someone goes to Border Town, how can we contact them? Some of them can perceive magic, so when a witch goes there, they will naturally find her. Shadow, what do you think? The masked woman looked behind him. I don't know. The witch called Shadow hesitated. Why don't we wait for my sister to come back and then make a decision? She will certainly know what to do. All right, she nodded, found a clean chair, and sat in front of Theo. Who is my sister? A guide. The masked woman's attitude had softened a lot compared to before, probably because he said that he was not afraid of witches. She felt a lot. She will take us away from here. Leave? Where? The other side shook her head, not answering. You are not a witch from Silver City, right? Theo continued to ask. Your accent doesn't seem to be from King's City. Silver City is very close to King's City, so the residents here are proud to imitate King's accent. She hesitated for a moment. I come from the south. Witches from all over the kingdom have gathered here, and soon they will be taken away by the guide. Theo thought in his heart, there is no doubt that this is another witch organization. They are recruiting their companions, just like the Witch Cooperation Association had done before. But, where are they going? At this moment, footsteps could be heard outside the house. Sister is back. Shadow cheered. As the wooden door creaked open, Theo also held his breath. He is the one who has been using underground channels to spread the news. The newcomer's voice was mature and steady. Did you ask him anything? What he said seems to be true. The masked woman explained the contents of the inquiry and her own views. If he didn't have a deep contact with the Witch Cooperation Association, it would be impossible for him to know so clearly. Well, that's also true. She brushed past Theo and stood in front of him. Unlike the masked woman, her face wasn't covered at all. Her long black hair almost reached her waist, and her appearance seemed to be around 25 or 26 years old. But the most noteworthy thing about her were her eyes. Theo discovered that the outer ring of her pupils was unexpectedly golden, and even though she was standing in the light, he could still clearly see her star-like eyes. Theo thought that he had seen many witches around His Highness, but this woman's appearance could still be regarded as one of the best. Her left eye had a scar that ran through her brow bone, extending down to her cheek. This scar not only didn't destroy her beauty, but instead gave her an austere aura. From the first time he saw her, Theo felt that this woman was a true warrior. If the Witch Cooperation Association really found the Holy Mountain, they shouldn't have sent people to spread such news. She shook her head. This will only make the church hear about it. If they don't leave Border Town as soon as possible, I'm afraid that a disaster will befall them. Then, what should we do? Shadow asked. The ship will arrive at midnight today. There are other witches on board, so you have to leave, she said without hesitation. I will escort you to the ship. As for the Witch Cooperation Association. The black-haired woman looked at Theo, who was tied to the chair. Please help me say hello to Tilly. Tell her that I will arrive a few days later. Maybe I can bring her more companions. You want to go with him to Border Town? Shadow said in surprise, but, in case this is a hoax. Chapter 147. Alicia didn't expect that one day she could become a member of the emissary group. After all, when the church sent the emissary group, the members of the team were always elite warriors. Not only were they well versed in both the pen and the sword, but they also had to be able to represent the face of the church. Alicia was very confident in her fighting skills and the etiquette of the church, but when it came to appearance, a woman who was always running around the defensive line, waving her sword all day long, how could she look good? Thinking of this, she felt a little uncomfortable. According to Mira, they were going to the western town of the Kingdom of Greycastle, to negotiate a case of the royal power shielding witches for blasphemy. In addition to the leading priest, the emissary group was composed of 10 judges, one of whom was the cold-faced captain of the Hermes defensive line. But now it seemed that even if he wasn't in battle, he still had a cold face. Just standing beside him, Alicia felt the temperature drop a lot. Mira, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. She was over 40 years old, with a pair of wise eyes. She always laughed and talked about the church's anecdotes. She was knowledgeable, enthusiastic and graceful. Even in front of the archbishop, her elegant demeanor was still not reduced. Alicia had heard more than once that she was likely to become the next archbishop candidate. And to the female warrior's surprise, as a civil official, Myra's horsemanship was not much worse than the other judges. For the past 2 days, she had been leading the team to the front. From the forest to the town trail, she was able to maintain the speed of the horse while reducing physical consumption. This kind of skill could only be mastered by the judges who had been trained for a long time. Aren't we going south? After leaving the Hermes boundary and entering the Kingdom of Greycastle, someone in the team asked. No, Border Town is too far away from us. If we go by land, I don't want my ass to be worn out. Mira waved her hand. let's first go east, to Deep Valley Town. There is a river leading to Redwater City. From Redwater City to Longsong Stronghold, it won't be long. When did you join the church? Alicia asked curiously. Not only do you know all kinds of interesting things about the holy city, but also the secular world. 12 years ago, when I was exactly 30 years old, Mira replied. So late, she said in surprise. As far as I know, the older you get, the more difficult it is to understand the teachings of God. It only took you 10 years to be promoted from a follower to a priest. It's incredible. Yes, Mira smiled. This is the charm of the church. I was originally the daughter of a merchant. I followed my father to the 4 great kingdoms as a merchant. When I brought the ordinary goods from one place to another, the price would be several times higher. For example, the emerald corals from the Siwinshire County could be bought from the local fishermen for only 20 to 30 silver royals. He could store it in a water tank and bring it to the Everwinter Kingdom's palace to be exchanged for a golden dragon. If the quality was good and the shape of the branches were even, they could be sold for more than 5. I often wonder why the same item has 2 different values. Because, the rarer something is, the more valuable it is? Alicia asked. I also thought so at first, the priest nodded. But then something happened that changed my opinion. A noble in King's City secretly harbored a witch who could change the temperature. He thought of all kinds of ways and finally raised the corals from the Siwinshire County in the cold King's City of Everwinter. He transformed the basement of the courtyard into a huge pond with a skylight at the top. He harvested the corals about once a year, and each harvest was more than the amount we could get from 10 round trips. And this long trade route, my father would only travel once a year. So the emerald corals on the market increased. He not only sold them to the palace, but also to the great nobles. If the rarer something is, the more valuable it is, the price of the emerald corals should continue to fall. But after only 2 years, the palace refused to accept the low price of the corals, thinking they were all counterfeits. My father sold the corals not only did not reduce the price, but also doubled. As for the nobles who hid the witches, they were caught by the church and burned at the stake together with the witches. But I know, the corals he raised were not counterfeits, they were no different from the emerald corals my father transported. The rarer something is, the more valuable it is not a wrong idea, but there are many reasons to determine the price of goods. This is only the simplest example, because the Palace of Everwinter regarded the emerald corals as a symbol of luxury, artificially setting its value. When more emerald corals appeared, it caused an impact on the rules of the royal family, so on the day of the execution, the queen also celebrated. Do you think these goods are like us in the secular world? Like what? Alicia did not come back to her senses. Like the people under the power of the king, child. Mira said word by word, we are given a price from birth, but this price is not the embodiment of our true value. We are like these emerald corals, obviously we are all the same, some are cheap, and some are unattainable. Unattainable, you mean the nobles? The nobles are the corals of the Palace of Everwinter, the priest said with a smile. They are born no different from us, a pair of hands, a pair of feet, a pair of eyes, and a mouth. However, they are artificially set to the highest value. This inequality is not due to their own ability, but from the rules of the king. So I joined the church, at least in the new holy city Hermes. Your birth will not limit your value. If we can turn the whole continent into the church's final holy city, the so-called kingdom of God will be nothing more than this. What you said is really great. Alicia nodded repeatedly, her heart excited. If they could really establish the kingdom of God described by Mira, people born without distinction of blood, and without untouchables and slaves, what a wonderful scene it would be. Kingdom of God. Humph, how many people do they want to turn into cold-blooded monsters? The cold-faced captain of the army of judges shook the reins and stepped forward. Sir Priestess, how much do you know about the God's punishment army? Hey, you! Alicia was about to tell him to pay attention to his manners, but before she could say anything, Mira stopped her. The God's Punishment Army is the Church's most powerful warrior. They are the faithful, willing to sacrifice, brave and fearless army of judges. The most powerful is not bad, but the army of judges is also not bad, but they will not transform into warriors, but a group of emotionless monsters. He coldly dropped this sentence, spurred his horse to run to the front of the team. What a rude person, Alicia said bitterly. When Hermes saw him, she felt that he was calm in the face of danger. He had the calmness of a commander and the bravery of a warrior. How could he become such a person now? It doesn't matter, he is just restless. Mira shook her head. In order to build the kingdom of God, there will inevitably be setbacks and sacrifices, but at least we are willing. When the team arrived at the next town, it was already late, so the priestess took the delegation to the church to rest. After eating, everyone went back to their rooms to sleep, but Alicia followed the captain of the army of judges and stopped him in the aisle. Sir, Mira is our leader. What do you mean by doing that? Have you forgotten all the rules and regulations of the church? Your name is Alicia, right? He was silent for a moment before he opened his mouth. Yes, now I am the same as you, a captain of the army of judges. As early as the months of the demons, I asked for your name, but you didn't say anything. Now can you tell me your name? Abrams, he said expressionlessly. As for why I did that, do you have brothers or sisters? No. Alicia suddenly remembered that he had once said that his brother was a God's punishment soldier. I do. He and I grew up together in the church. We knew each other as if we were the same person. Later, he took the initiative to accept the God's punishment soldier transformation, and I never saw him again. The presiding judge told me that his transformation was very successful, and now he is out on a special mission for the church. I was sincerely happy for him. He paused, until one day, I saw him again in the cathedral. I called his name, and wanted to hug him, but guess what I saw? Abram's face showed a trace of pain, a stranger. As if he didn't see me at all, he walked straight past me. His eyes were lifeless, staring straight ahead. His behavior was not like that of a human. A chill ran down Alicia's spine. She wanted to shout that he was lying, but no words came out of her mouth. Chapter 148. Border Town welcomed the long-awaited rainy weather. The sky was overcast, and the rain fell from the sky, hitting the windowsill and glass, making a pitter-patter sound. Supposedly, spring should be a rainy season, warm and humid. But in Border Town, since the end of the months of demons, the number of times it rained could be counted on one hand. Fortunately, the farmland was next to the river, so it was very convenient to water it. Now, the heavy rain dispelled the oppressive atmosphere. Nightingale opened the window, letting the fragrant smell of the earth flow into the room. Looking from afar, she could see that the crops on the other side of the Redwater River had already sprouted. The green wheat seedlings were endless, extending to the end of the field of vision. Under the washing of the rain, these crops looked extremely bright, forming a sharp contrast with the gray river. Roland stretched and threw the quill in his hand into the pen holder. Finished drawing? Nightingale asked. Well, a brand new weapon. It can increase the firing speed of the gun several times. Roland stacked more than a dozen blueprints together. I named it a revolving rifle. Do you want to see it? No, she curled her lips. I can't understand it anyway. This is only the basic model. If the barrel is shortened, it will be a revolving pistol, which can be carried around. But if you want to use it, you still need to solve another key technology. When the time comes, I will give each of you one, and you will no longer have to fear the church's army of judges. You mean, it can allow an ordinary woman to knock down a fully armed man? Not just one, but several. Roland smiled proudly. If we're lucky, it won't be a problem for us to defeat 5 men. Nightingale showed a look of disbelief, and just as she was about to say something, there was suddenly a knock on the office door. Your Highness, Barev's apprentice has returned from King's City. He also brought a saltpeter merchant. He is now waiting for you outside the castle. Assistant Minister's apprentice? Roland thought for a moment, then remembered this matter. During the attack on Longsong Stronghold, there was not much gunpowder left in the town. He had sent his guards to Fallen Dragon Ridge and Redwater City, hoping to obtain a new source of saltpeter. Barev's acolyte was the last to be sent out, and his destination was the royal capital. After all, there were all kinds of goods there. Moreover, with the arrival of summer, the production of saltpeter would definitely increase greatly. Unexpectedly, the last person to be sent out was the first to bring back good news. Bring them to the living room. I'll be there soon. Roland looked at the sky. Also, ask the kitchen to serve a dessert. When he turned around, Nightingale had already disappeared. However, he knew that she was by his side. When Roland walked into the reception hall, the saltpeter merchant was also led into the hall by the guards. She took off her wet cloak and straw hat and bowed to the prince. I am Marjorie Farman from King's City. Greetings, Your Highness Wimbledon. Seeing that the person was actually a woman, Roland was slightly startled. The business environment in this era was far less safe than in the future. Not only could they run into bandits and refugees, but there were also local bullies and underground forces in the town. Therefore, female merchants were not common. Like lightning, she had brilliant blonde hair, but her hair was thicker and longer. She was probably in her 30s. Perhaps because she was an ordinary person, there were wrinkles around her eyes and forehead. Her skin was darker and looked a bit rough at first glance. However, judging from her face, she was not a Majin, but a fjord resident. Sit down. The prince made an inviting gesture, then sat down in the main seat. You are not from Grey Castle, are you? Why do you say that? Marjorie smiled. Your hair color is very rare in the mainland kingdom. As far as I know, most of the people on the other side of the strait have beautiful blonde hair. I also know an explorer from the other side of the sea. You are really knowledgeable. My hometown is indeed in the fjords, but I have been living there for more than 10 years. Now I live in King's City, so I can be considered as half a Grey Castle resident. She paused. You just left King's City not long ago, maybe we met somewhere. I am very honored to live in the same city as Your Highness. Sure enough, a successful businessman was very good at talking. Even though he knew that the other party was flattering him, Roland still felt very comfortable in his heart. At this moment, he felt a strong pinch on his right side. Well, at this time, there is no need to judge the authenticity of the truth, Comrade Nightingale. But when it comes to explorers, this is a great title in the fjords. Marjorie went on to say, you may not understand, but the land that the people of the fjords can live on is very rare. There, the sea rises and falls, some islands will be swallowed by the sea when the tide rises, while others will erupt all day long with flames and smoke, the stones will melt under the high temperature, converging into a dark red river. Only those who open up new channels, or find new suitable inhabited islands, are qualified to receive this title. The average person will not call himself an explorer. Ha, she not only calls herself an explorer, but also calls her father the greatest explorer. Roland shook his head with a smile. She's just a child. She likes to think of herself as a great person. In the fjords, even children will not easily say this title. Marjorie frowned. Did she mention her father's name? Seeing the other's expression, Roland also realized that something was wrong. Could it be that the word explorer is the spiritual belief of the people of the sea, so it can't be called randomly? Her father's name is Thunder. Unexpectedly, as soon as he said this name, the other's eyes immediately widened. Do you know Sir Thunder? No, I know his daughter. Why, have you heard of this name? Who in the fjords hasn't heard of this name? Sir Thunder discovered the Twin Peaks Island and the Sea Dragon Bay, and expanded the area where everyone lived by almost half. He also drew a detailed map of the East Coast and the Endless Cape, and today, 80% of the routes to the mainland are opened up by him. Every child is familiar with the deeds of Sir Thunder. He is one of the greatest explorers of the fjords. But I heard that Thunder seems to have been buried at the bottom of the sea because of a storm. No, Your Highness, a real explorer will not fall because of a storm. He has encountered countless dangers, but in the end, he has succeeded and survived. At this moment, Sir Thunder must be somewhere gathering a new expedition team, just like what he did before. Marjorie slightly leaned forward. Your Highness, do you know the whereabouts of his daughter? Roland was also a little surprised. He did not expect that Lightning's father was so famous. Those adventure stories that sounded like the Arabian Nights, were they all true? She lives in my castle. After the shipwreck, she drifted all the way west to Border Town, and I happened to take her in. In your castle? Her expression was overflowing with expectation. Can you let me see his daughter? Well, probably not now. At this moment, Lightning should be cruising around the concealing forest, looking for the ruins marked on the treasure map. She is currently practicing jungle exploration skills. If you plan to stay here for one night, you should be able to wait until she comes back. Then I will bother you. Marjorie nodded without hesitation. Can we talk about business now? Chapter 149. Do you specialize in saltpeter in King City? Roland cut to the chase. No, Your Royal Highness. Marjorie no longer had a formal smile at the moment, and her tone was a bit more intimate. I manage a lot of things, from gems to cloth, from hotels to pubs. In fact, a month ago, I didn't sell saltpeter. It's just that the original owner of the saltpeter field lost everything in my casino, so he had to mortgage the entire field to me. Not only does she sell all kinds of goods, but she also runs a service business. What is this merchant's background? You should know that opening a casino in King's City isn't something that can be done with money alone. He knocked on the table, but Nightingale pinched the middle. This meant that the other side was carrying a god's stone of retaliation, so she couldn't tell whether she was lying or not. Wait. Since she couldn't tell, why did she pinch her right side so hard before? Roland coughed twice, resisting the urge to turn around and ask. He had heard that after some merchants from the fjords settled in the Four Kingdoms, their businesses would grow bigger and bigger, and the wealth they accumulated would be unimaginable. After all, the people of the sea were born merchants, with a very adventurous spirit and a keen sense of smell. They were good at capturing business opportunities. Many of them, after becoming rich, were sheared like sheep, and some of them succeeded in establishing a foothold, bribing the local relations, and forming a relatively stable alliance of interests. Could it be that Marjorie is also one of the rich? That being the case, Roland decided to go straight to the point. I need a lot of saltpeter, the more the better. But the western region of the kingdom isn't a hot place, especially the town near the impassable mountain range. Your Royal Highness, do you really need so much saltpeter? She curiously asked. In the outskirts of King's City, I have 3 saltpeter fields, enough to supply a medium-sized city's aristocracy with ice. 3 saltpeter fields. Roland was suddenly overjoyed, but the expression on his face didn't change. I intend to build a cold storage in the castle basement, to store some perishable food. If you give me the right price, I want all of these saltpeter. Since you said so, she nodded. I can ship all of the saltpeter to Border Town, and only charge you 90% of the market price. But what? I don't really want the Golden Dragon. They're filling up my warehouse. I heard that you have some very special products here. If possible, could you use these to replace the Golden Dragon? I will be happy to come to an agreement with you. A special product? Roland was stunned. This was the first time he had heard of someone not wanting the Golden Dragon. Yes, for example, a self-operating black iron creation. Marjorie leaned forward slightly. Your servant said that this thing only needs to be lit to boil water, and it will have amazing power. In fact, it was because of this that I decided to personally come to Border Town. Otherwise, selling the saltpeter directly to the nobles of King's City would be more in line with my interests. The further the transportation distance, the greater the loss I have to bear. What a pleasant surprise, Roland thought. Although he didn't know how Barev's apprentice came to know about the steam engine, it was obvious that this merchant from the King's City was very interested in it. He was very clear how amazing the profits of industrial products were, especially this kind of mechanical product that could only be made by himself. He was originally worried that after Border Town stopped selling ore, the money he had moved from the Duke's mansion would one day be used up. He didn't expect that now an excellent opportunity would be placed in front of him. So that's how it is, the prince smiled. The thing you mentioned is called a steam engine. It can turn the steam produced by boiling water into power. The principle is very simple, but only Border Town can produce it. Does this thing really exist? Of course, Roland said, but it is very complicated to make, and quite expensive. If you are interested, you can come with me to see the real thing. I would be happy to, she said excitedly, getting up. In the North Slope mine, Marjorie's eyes almost fell out of their sockets when she saw the ear-piercing roar of the steel monster as it pulled the cart full of stones out of the mine. Your Highness, this is incredible. She said in a trembling voice, I thought that your messenger was exaggerating, but I didn't expect him to say that it was far less than. I'm afraid that even dozens of people together can't compare to this steam engine. The female merchant wanted to take a step closer to see it, but was stopped by Roland. The working steam engine is very dangerous, don't get too close to it. Do you see the white gas that comes out? As long as it touches you, it will burn your skin. Do you only use it to transport ore? Because of the noise, she had to raise her head and ask loudly. There are a total of 2 in the mine. The first engine is responsible for pulling the cart, and the second engine is responsible for pumping water from the mine. Roland replied, in fact, since the success of the development until today, Border Town has only produced 3 steam engines, so I have to use them where they are most needed. But it actually has a very wide range of uses. In addition to what you see, it can also replace the windmill and the water wheel to grind wheat, and it is not affected by the river or the wind. Any place that needs a lot of manpower or animal power, it can come in handy. It can even be installed on a sailboat to drive the oars, so that ships can sail fast without sails. He knew how important it was for the people of the fjords to have a ship that could ignore the wind and direction. Sure enough, Marjorie looked at Roland, her eyes almost shining. You name a price, I want to buy it. This one can't do, the mine depends on it to maintain production. You can first order a few new steam engines, and when the saltpeter arrives, we can settle the account. How much is it? Roland took her to a place far away from the entrance of the mine, where the noise of the machine was no longer so harsh. 500 golden dragon, he said. This price was a bit exaggerated, almost equivalent to the annual income of a knight's territory. The cost of the ore for the steam engine was about 20 golden dragon, plus the smelting, labor, and installation costs. It was only 50 golden dragon. But when it came to business, it was always a matter of bargaining. Then it's a deal. I want to buy 10 steam engines. Roland was startled. 10 of them was 5,000 gold coins. It was almost equivalent to the savings of the Duke of Ryan for 5 or 6 years. They didn't even bargain. Is this how rich people do business? He cleared his throat. Are you sure? This is not a small cost. Moreover, the machine can't be used forever after you buy it. You have to constantly invest money to maintain it. I know, just like the ship. Every year we have to go to the shipyard to clean the keel parasites and algae, replace the sails and cables, and so on. Marjorie said indifferently, what needs to be replaced, I can buy it from you. If it doesn't work, you can also name a price, and sell the maintenance and operation of the machine to me. Roland closed his mouth. There was only one thought in his mind. It was good to be rich. Chapter 150. Lightning was flying over the concealing forest. In her eyes, the world seemed to have become smaller. As far as her eyes could see, the details disappeared one by one, leaving only patches of color. Brown was the earth, gray was the mountains, green was the forest, and blue was the river. Green occupied the majority of her vision. Unlike the bright green grass of Border Town, the green here was a mixture of gray and black, deep and thick. Whether to the west or to the north, she couldn't see the end of this dark green. If she looked at it for a long time, she would feel like she was falling. Lightning had to look up at the sky from time to time, dispelling the growing sense of restraint. Behind her, the gray clouds were very low, covering the peaks of the impassable mountain range, shrouding Border Town in rain and fog. At the moment, she was looking for the ruins of 450 years ago in the concealing forest, which was undoubtedly a great adventure. Half a month ago, when she heard the task Roland gave her, Lightning immediately patted her chest and agreed. Unlike the snake magician Kara, who didn't want to let go of the ancient book, His Highness Roland repeatedly told her that this drawing could only be used as a reference, and told her to pay attention to safety. It didn't matter if she couldn't find it. This made the little girl very happy. She knew that what His Highness said was right. Even if it was a castle, after more than 400 years, it would be swallowed up by the plants growing everywhere, gradually turning into a pile of dust. But she still wanted to find this place. Determining the position of the six-pointed star was equivalent to determining the position of the holy city of Tequila. After hearing the ins and outs of the matter, Lightning naturally understood what Tequila meant. There, she was likely to help His Highness discover the real reason why the church broke out with the demons. This was much more exciting than her father taking her to explore the route. In accordance with the method of making a nautical chart, Lightning drew a square piece of parchment full of equidistant grids, and then based on the distance she flew over a period of time, she simply calculated the contents of the grids to be filled. When the squares were filled, almost the entire area was searched. Now she had filled half of the squares. The rain clouds were approaching faster than Lightning had imagined. The little girl could even faintly hear the rolling thunder in the clouds. She lowered her altitude and flew towards the forest below. At this moment, a grayish-white shadow flashed past the corner of his eyes. Startled, she pulled her body to a stop and floated in the air. She turned around and scanned the area she had just passed. Nothing was found. Was it an illusion? Lightning thought about it and decided to fly around the area again. This time, she lowered the height even more. The forest was no longer a block of green. Mottled tree trunks, forked branches, and leaves of different shapes. Details separated from the color blocks and once again returned to Lightning's eyes. Dozens of breaths later, she suddenly saw a small portion of a white stone pagoda hidden beneath the layers of branches. The entire top of the stone tower had been cut off, causing the tower to be covered by the forest. It was very difficult to see it from the sky. If she hadn't been hiding from the rain clouds, she might have missed it. Lightning's heart beat violently. Was this the location of the ruins indicated on the map? She circled around the stone tower and didn't find anything unusual. She decided to get closer to see what was going on. After landing, the little girl found that it was not appropriate to call it a white stone tower. Its surface was covered with vines and moss, and when she looked closely, it had turned into a grayish-green color. The tower was slightly tilted, as if it had been hit by a huge force. There were scattered stones around, which were similar in material and color to the stone tower. They should have come from the broken top of the tower. She could still see traces of the larger ones, but the smaller ones were probably buried in the weeds and mud. The whole stone tower was quite large, and the area of the bottom of the tower was comparable to His Highness Roland's castle. A man-made object like this would usually have a basement. Logically, at this moment, she should record the location of the ruins and then return to Border Town. The various adventure stories in her mind also reminded her that it was not a good choice to break into the ruins that had been dormant for hundreds of years. Even the gas sealed underground could kill her. But Lightning found that she couldn't move her feet at all. Her curiosity kept nagging in her ear, "Go in and take a look, just take a look." She looked up at the sky. The originally clear sky had now become gloomy and dark. Obviously, a heavy rain was coming. She told herself that it would be very uncomfortable to fly when it rained. "I'll go to the tower to take shelter from the rain and take a look. If I find the basement, I absolutely won't go in alone." After thinking about it, Lightning could no longer restrain her curiosity. She walked to the entrance covered with vines, pulled out a knife from her waist, cleared a small hole for her to pass through, and climbed in. The wooden door had long been corroded, and she smoothly entered the tower. Because the top had been lifted, she could see clearly without a torch. Lightning circled the bottom of the tower, but found nothing. Obviously, the exposed items and traces had been erased by time. Except for the broken walls, there was nothing left on the ground. She also found a gradual hole in the wall, which should have been used for a staircase, but the staircase itself had disappeared. The passage to the basement was very conspicuous. It was in the southwest of the first floor, facing the entrance of the stone tower. Lightning suspected that if she followed this direction toward the barbarian land, she would find the holy city of Tequila recorded in the ancient books. At this moment, tiny raindrops fell from the sky and dripped on Lightning's nose. She slowly walked into the underground passage, turned a corner, and a wooden door appeared in front of her. Although it was not completely corroded, it looked so broken that it would fall apart at the slightest touch. Soon, the light rain outside became a downpour. The pitter-patter of the rainwater hitting the ground gradually became from chaotic to inseparable. Although there was no rain in this place, the water quickly flowed down the stone steps. In order to avoid getting her shoes wet, Lightning let her feet off the ground and slowly floated up. Suddenly, she vaguely heard a shout, mixed with the sound of the rain. It was almost impossible to distinguish. This sound suddenly made her hair stand on end. The little girl panicked and looked around. In the narrow passage, except for a few scattered withered vines, there was nothing else. With the faint light from the outside, she opened her waist bag and took out a portable torch and flint, wanting to light a fire to take a closer look. But at this time, the shout sounded again. This time it seemed to come from the wooden door behind her. Lightning could not help but tremble and quickly turned around. The torch slipped out of his hand and fell to the ground, splashing water everywhere. This time the voice seemed a lot clearer. She could vaguely distinguish that it was a woman's voice. Was there someone in the basement? This thought made her back break out in a cold sweat. How could this be? The stone tower should be a relic left behind more than 400 years ago, and it was located in the depths of the concealing forest. Besides herself, who else could reach here? Help me. When the third voice sounded, it was very clear. The voice did come from behind the wooden door, and it sounded like a cry for help. Lightning swallowed a mouthful of saliva, carefully put her hand on the door, and gently pushed it. The wet and slippery wooden door fell backward and hit the ground with a muffled bang. A tall figure suddenly appeared in front of her. Lightning felt the blood in her body solidify. The figure's appearance was the same as the devil in Soroya's painting. In the dim light, the devil seemed to be staring at her. Its huge body leaned forward slightly, holding an axe in its hand with only 3 fingers. The body of the axe reflected the dark red stains of blood. In a flash, the bloody scenes of these brutal people killing the Witch Cooperation Association sisters all came into her mind. Ah! She burst into a scream, threw the flint in her hand towards the other side, turned around with the fastest speed and rushed out of the passage. She flew directly into the rain and fled in the direction of Border Town. Lightning did not notice that the flint hit the devil's chest, making a crisp sound. The place where it was hit had a circle of fine cracks, and then quickly spread until it covered the whole body. The devil's body collapsed under these more and more cracks, turning into a burst of white dust that disappeared with the wind. Chapter 151. After visiting the steam engine, Roland and Marjorie returned to the castle office and continued to discuss the details of the trade contract. If this kind of negotiation involved bargaining, it was common for the two sides to argue for a day or two, so generally, the Minister of Finance would be responsible for the negotiation, while the Lord only needed to state the quantity and the bottom line. However, since the other side had already finalized the price, Roland could save a lot of effort. I expect that the next time I come, it will be a month later, and at that time, 3 single-masted ships full of saltpeter will arrive with me. The female merchant quickly wrote on the parchment, calculated at 90% of the market price, it is worth about 315 golden dragon. At that time, the town will be able to produce almost 2 steam engines. Roland deliberately lowered the number, which is 1,000 golden dragon. You can use the golden dragon to make up the difference, or you can use other goods to replace it. What kind of goods do you need? Iron, copper, lead, and green vitriol, he said, they are all common minerals. But for the first 3, I don't need ore, but smelted metal ingots. In addition, I also need 10 sets of crystal glassware. As for whether or not it is carved, whether it is a kettle or a wine cup, it doesn't matter, but it must be the best products produced by the King City's alchemy workshop. If the price exceeds the difference, I can make up for it or deduct it from the next month's cost of the 2 steam engines. You think of me as your exclusive merchant, Marjorie chuckled. Although I don't operate a mine, I know a few people in the same trade who specialize in ore trading. It's just that I never expected that such a desolate border could contain such a huge business opportunity. There are only a few nobles living here, but we have to consume a lot of saltpeter. This town was originally built for the North Slope mine, but we still have to buy minerals from outside. This is simply not in line with my business common sense. Your Royal Highness, your territory is incredible. One of the major characteristics of industrial production was to swallow a large number of raw materials and export the finished products. Roland spread his hands. The town will ask for more in the future. I think we can reach a long-term agreement. At this moment, Marjorie's eyes suddenly widened, and she looked behind Roland in surprise. The latter was stunned, and subconsciously turned his head, only to see a drenched Lightning clinging to the floor-to-ceiling window, her hands clutching the glass, her face full of panic. Her face was pale, and her hair stuck to her forehead, with water droplets constantly dripping down from her hair, as if she had just been fished out of the water. Roland quickly got up and opened the window. After Lightning flew into the room, she threw herself into Roland's arms. Her panicked expression immediately relaxed, and her body softened as she fainted. Nightingale, quickly call Nana. He anxiously said. Yes. A reply came from the empty side. What was going on? She shouldn't have encountered demonic beasts or demons in the air. Could it be that the other party also had the ability to fly? Roland roughly examined Lightning's body. When he found that there were no obvious injuries, he was slightly relieved. Your Royal Highness, is she the Lightning you mentioned? Marjorie covered her mouth, slowly approached the prince, and carefully looked at the little girl in his arms. Roland's heart thumped. Damn, how could I forget her? He shouted towards the door, Sean. The guard answered and entered the office. I'm sorry, Miss Marjorie, I can only ask you to stay here for a while. The prince stood up with Lightning in his arms. Take this King City merchant to the guest room on the first floor. Without my order, don't let her out. Yes. What? No, Your Royal Highness, please wait. She suddenly realized. I have no malice towards witches, not to mention that she is Thunder's daughter. I will not go to the church. I'm just in case, Roland interrupted. Later, I will come to you to verify. Your Royal Highness, she woke up. Nightingale opened the door and said. Roland nodded and followed Nightingale into the bedroom. The bucket next to the bed was still steaming, and the soaked clothes were casually hanging on the edge of the bucket. A group of witches surrounded the bed. Vendi was sitting on the edge of the bed, gently combing the little girl's still wet hair. Lightning's previously pale face was now a little rosy. She reclined on 2 pillows, the quilt was pulled up high, and only half of her head was exposed. Her eyes were staring straight at Roland. How is the situation? She's not injured. She's in a coma due to the exhaustion of her magic, Nightingale replied. Vendi helped her wash her body and carried her into the quilt. She woke up not long after. He walked to the bed and smiled at Lightning. What happened? Why did you fly back in a panic in the rain? I found the ruins, she muttered in a low voice. But there are demons inside. This sentence made everyone's complexion change. Did you go inside? Scroll asked. No, Lightning shook her head and told them what had happened. The demons were guarding the basement door, and there were people inside calling for help. But I was too scared, and only thought about running away. I didn't think of a way to save her. She shrunk her head into the quilt. Am I not qualified to be an explorer? No, you did a good job, Roland comforted her. A good explorer knows how to judge the situation, and won't deliberately put themselves in danger. You couldn't save her by yourself, so running away was the right choice. Is there a witch in the stone tower? Vendi pondered. Except for witches, no one can reach the depths of the concealing forest. Witches also won't go there, Scroll shook her head. It's a ruin from 450 years ago. If you don't have a map to guide you, finding the location of the stone tower in the vast forest is as difficult as ascending to heaven. Unless what? Roland asked. Unless someone has been living there, Scroll slowly said. You mean that they didn't set out from the kingdom, but from 450 years ago, they have been continuing their descendants there, living in isolation? The prince rejected this speculation in his heart. Living in the virgin forest, what kind of concept was that? Elusive beasts, all kinds of terrible insects and poisons, without a stable source of food, even Bear Grylls couldn't live in the forest for a long time. What's more, this world also had several months of snowy winter, coupled with demonic beasts and demons running amok. Settling in the concealing forest was simply suicidal. He looked at Lightning. Are there any signs of human habitation near the ruins? No. The little girl shook her head. Maybe there is more than one map, Soroya said. Maybe there are people like us, also looking for the whereabouts of Tequila. No matter what, we can't help them, Leaf sighed. Except for Lightning, no one can quickly go to the stone tower. I'm afraid we won't know the real situation until we go there, Roland touched his chin. In short, it's good to be able to come back safe and sound. Tonight's classes will be stopped for a day, everyone should have a good rest. When the time comes, the puzzle will naturally be solved. Leaving Lightning's bedroom, he said to Nightingale, Next, we still have a problem to solve. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.